If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today we are tackling one of the most requested logical analyses on a flat earth debate. That of Jeranism, David Weiss, and the one and only Austin Witsit versus Professor Bryant Meyers. And unlike that other Professor Dave goof, this guy's actually a professor, and he actually has more than one brain cell to rub together. He actually seems pretty intelligent. And he also seems to be arguing in good faith, which is what's important here. Now, I can't tell, obviously I don't know the guy, but it seems like he's here for an actual good faith debate and discussion. So we'll see how well that works, and we will see if the one and only Austin Witsit is able to have some meaningful exchanges with Bryant Meyers. So this guy has multiple degrees in physics. So it should be very, very interesting. As always, if you find MINDSHOCK interesting, informative, and entertaining, you can donate to our PayPal. Help support logic and reason in a world where it is becoming extinct. This isn't about conclusions and what the shape of the Earth actually is. This is about a logical analysis on logical argumentation and who is using more logical fallacies to present their position, and whether or not one has come to the belief that they chose logically or as a result of indoctrination and indoctrination facilities, regardless of what the truth actually is. That's not the point here. I mean, there's so many triggered goofs coming out of the woodwork that only want to obsess about conclusions instead of the point of these entire analyses, which are to analyze logical argumentation. So if you want more of that, you can help support us. Just check the link in the description for our PayPal link. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, so before we get started, I will just give the disclaimer again. This podcast is not about the shape of the Earth. This podcast is about logical argumentation and who argues their position more or less fallaciously. We will, of course, have the logical fallacies counter. I am also going to add a zingers counter just for the heck of it to make it even more entertaining, because even though some of these flat earth debates are hilarious for all the wrong reasons, we can make it even funnier because insults separated from the fallacies. So just to examine who has the best insults or zingers per se, if this is used as an argument, it is also counted as an ad hominem logical fallacy. Now, whether or not it's used as part of the argument, it will also be counted in the zinger section if it is truly a good zinger. And then we will examine who is the champion. I also want to say, for people that are interested in logical debate, you are in for a treat. I mean, witnessing Austin Witsit debate is like watching prime Michael Jordan play basketball. Again, it has nothing to do with him being a flat earther, if he really is, or if he's simply just arguing for the flat earth side and he's actually a globe earther, or if he's on the fence and he has a neutral position. Whatever the case is, Austin Witsit's command of logic and logical fallacies is absolutely incredible. It far exceeds my own, and I've been dealing with and studying with logic and logical fallacies specifically for many, many years. I may or may not have a couple degrees from a couple different universities that some might find prestigious. I would never use this as an argument. I don't even want to bring those up because either the points I'm making are fallacious or they are not. Whatever indoctrination I happen to receive at whatever indoctrination facilities has no merit on the argument itself. The argument itself should be examined for its own merit. And I don't know Austin Witsit's background. I don't know how many degrees he does or doesn't have. But what cannot be denied is this guy's greatest of all time status as a debater. I've watched a lot of debates on a lot of different subjects. I have never seen anybody as good as Austin Witsit. People think Ben Shapiro is a good debater. Some people think that he's actually pretty decent, but he's usually coming against really weak opposition. Austin Witsit just plows over any and all opposition I've seen. I haven't seen him debate Bryant Meyers yet, so we'll see how he does against this guy. Usually Austin, unfortunately, is paired up with these just mental midgets on the Modern Day Debate podcast. It's actually hard to get through some of those debates because these people aren't even on a first grade English level, and Austin Witsit is forced to play them. And can you imagine how bored Michael Jordan would be playing with toddlers? I mean, they don't even know what a fadeaway is, let alone how to hit it, how to block it. I mean, that's Austin Witsit versus his usual opposition on the Modern Day Debate channel. Very difficult to go through. I mean, a lot of those people that he's arguing with, they might actually be mentally disabled. So it'd be interesting to see Austin Witsit against a worthy opponent. And again, just in terms of pure argumentation, I have not ever seen anybody as good as Austin Witsit, and I would say he doesn't even have a close second right now. People want to give me props, but I don't think so. I don't think I would be able to defeat Austin Witsit in any debate on any subject. He would probably be my number one pick for any debate on any subject, just because of his command of logic and logical fallacies. Nothing to do with flat earth, of course, just mentioning logic. So again, if Michael Jordan played on a different team, that wouldn't diminish his skills. I mean, he actually played for the Wizards. He actually did. His numbers were pretty crazy for a guy his age. Again, if you haven't checked out the Michael Jordan podcast on MINDSHOCK, I did a logical analysis on Michael Jordan's career and who is the greatest of all time in basketball. But here, in the world of debate, I will nominate Austin Witsit as the best of all time, and we are in for a treat here just watching him debate in general. So let's get started.
This is live. It is the 15th of September. It is 6:05 p.m. And it's time for Jaron and Dave and Sean and Austin to get schooled about living on the globe by Professor Bryant Meyers, BS, MA, Physics. I don't think the BS stands for what I think it does, but maybe it does. We'll bring everybody on. Let's say hello to everybody. First, we've got... Oh, we got to get rid of that real quick. Hold on. We got a bar in the way. There we go. We've got Witsit down in the corner. Austin Witsit, how are you, my friend?
Good. How's it going, man? Looking forward to it. Should be good convo.
Should be fun. And we've got to his right, your left, Sean Hibbler from Hibbler Productions. Sean, what's up?
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me on. Enjoy the show.
Should be fun. And we've got, of course, Dave Weiss in the house, the man, the myth, the legend, the Jew. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. That's all. How's it going? Welcome. I'm looking forward to this. Brian, let me introduce Brian. He reached out to me a while ago, and he came across like really nice, and he's like, I believe this and that, and he wanted to have this debate. And I said, rather than have a debate, let's have a discussion. And he agreed to come on with all of us. So it's not 4 against 1. It's 5 guys having a conversation about what they truly believe.
I'm going to stop him right there because it is probably going to be 4-on-1, but let's give Bryant props here. Usually, it's all the triggered goof globe earthers who are just jumping on one guy, some scientifically skeptical individual who's questioning the shape of the earth, which is a scientific thing to do, unlike a religious thing to just take something on blind faith. Again, the subject being the shape of the earth is irrelevant here. Science versus scientism is the question. So we really have to give Bryant props here, especially if he truly is discussing in good faith.
Brian is not a troll. He is not a scammer of any way. He 100% believes what he believes, and he's going to try to school us. And, we're going to try to school him. And maybe somebody will change their mind at the end of the day. Now, we all know that we have all shown that we are able to change our minds because we were all Globers at one point. So we'll see what happens. And we're probably going to agree to disagree on many things. And we're going to let Bryant do as much talking as he can. We might get a little heated, but we're not going to call each other names because we're not little fairy boys. All right.
Is he referring to Professor Dave there and a lot of these other groups? Okay, I would like to know this. So David Weiss brought up an excellent point that authority worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists, I don't know why they don't look at this point. I guess they're too mentally weak and too mentally deficient to examine that very important piece of information. So coincidence theorists and authority worshiping cultists, they always psychologically project onto whoever is against their position that they're just sheep, and they were hoodwinked by some random conspiracy theorist on the internet into believing that. Well, here's the thing. They at least, even if the conspiracy theorists, authority worshiping cultists, and or flat earthers, even if they're wrong about everything, the mental strength required to go against the establishment, to go against the crowd, that cannot be denied. So David Weiss brings up an interesting point there that not enough people really bring up. Even if these flat earthers or conspiracy theorists are wrong about everything, they did show that they were mentally strong enough to change their position, not some kind of flim, flam, fickle switcheroo. When the idiot box says one thing, they switch. That to go against the mainstream and the establishment and be willing to be subjected to this amount of ridicule. I mean, is there anyone more ridiculed than a flat earther? So their mental strength in that department, even if they're wrong about everything, I'm not saying anybody's wrong or right, but David Weiss brings up an excellent point there.
And Bryant, what did I miss? What did I leave out? Say hello.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to just kind of going through. I got the full spectrum of topics on globe versus flat earth, so I think we'll be able to cover a lot of ground, and I've spent a lot of time preparing this, so it's very efficient. And and I hope, at the very least, even if no one changes their mind, I think there's a lot of science that maybe could be like sharpened on the flat earth side, because I've just heard so much that's so easy to, just basic physics stuff that's easy to debunk. And then we'll get into
one other thing which I wanted to say, which Bryant is on the same side of the fence as everybody else here on things that we shall not mention on YouTube. Okay, he is on the same side of the fence on everything. I said in a couple of emails to him, you're really pissing me off because I'm starting to like you.
Yeah.
And we differ on two things: flat Earth and the moon landings.
You guys don't think birds are robots, do you? Though.
No, we don't.
Okay. So yeah, it's probably just those two things. Then yeah.
And the thing that jumps out right away too, Bryant really does seem like a likable, genuine, good-hearted guy. Now, is that going to work against him when looking at conspiracies? Because a lot of things certain conspiracy theorists do, I'm not saying the majority, I'm not even saying a large minority. It might be a very small minority, but they're very vocal. They attack some of these coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists who don't believe that there are any conspiracies, that there's criminals out there not working alone or in elements of the government. A lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, it's because these authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists, they're so good-hearted. I mean, they might be mentally deficient. They might have extreme Dunning-Kruger. They might not understand logic in any way, but they're so good-hearted. It's difficult for them to understand the evil and corruption that exists in other humans. And the mental strength required to understand that, that's a big ask. That's a really big ask. So Bryant might not possess the mental fortitude required to confront the levels of corruption at play. That doesn't mean he's not a nice guy. That doesn't mean he's not a really good-hearted guy. That might mean that in greater amounts than even conspiracy theorists who might be correct about certain things, but are quite cold-hearted. But we're here to discuss logic, but I did want to address that for the people that might want to attack Bryant as a troll. He does not seem to be trolling from the outset here. We'll continue to examine.
Okay, good. So there's a couple of really weird out there ones that I'm not into, but I've heard enough of your stuff to know that we pretty much agree on everything except the two little things. If we can, I would rather not get into the moon landing tonight, because that's just not an area I've spent time researching enough. So I want to focus more on just the science, more on...
Well, already right there's a red flag. If he hasn't really spent the time researching and looking at the proof, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So if you're going to be scientific, if you're going to be scientifically skeptical, why would he believe in the moon landings if he hasn't spent time researching them? That's pretty anti-science. It's a very religious stance. So already, this is the first red flag for Bryant in terms of logical reasoning, but I won't use that as a major fallacy here, because technically he's saying he wants to avoid that aspect of conversation instead of providing support for it, so we'll leave that alone.
Well, let's
we can talk about the moon. I want to talk about the moon, but
not the landing there.
not the moon.
Not the lunar module. Gotcha.
Can we not talk about the LEM?
Show. If you give me some time to do my own research, really be more thorough on that, I'm happy to do that.
It won't be a fun show because we'll all be moon landing deniers, and we'll be like, "Why are we here? Why are we here? What are we
Echo
talking
chamber.
I've got a couple of doozies for that, but maybe we'll bring that up with the moon. I just want to bring up a couple things that I think are pretty solid proofs that we did land on the moon. But let's start, if you don't mind. Can we just start with the whole Earth? Because I hear flat earthers always, or people that believe in flat Earth. How do you like to be addressed? I want to be like,
we like to be called flurfs.
We 100% deny a globe heliocentric beehive model. 100% doesn't exist.
Well, people that believe in flat Earth. I mean, it's easier to say flat earthers, but I mean, I know that's better.
What's
to
a
say.
level and stationary plane?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're globe deniers is the most generic.
open-minded.
If I do say this flat earthers, I'm not saying that in a derogatory way.
Okay.
It just kind of comes out quickly and efficiently.
You're good.
So that's one of the things that I mean, can I share my screen here now, or do
You
I
can,
gotta-
but you're ready to go. Yeah, whenever you want to do.
Go ahead, fire in the hole.
Okay. All right. So let me make sure I'm. Okay. Am I shared right now, or I don't see it?
You are good. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just not seeing it on the side. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, of course, a question that comes up a lot of, flat Earth believers that I've talked to, it's like, well, show me a picture of the globe. It's like, and then of course you get into what I feel are actual pictures. And before you get into the photo forensic speech, I actually spent a whole day going through photoforensics.com and Forensically, which are two online photo forensics tools. And I actually went and found the highest resolution images of blue marble and Earth rising and a couple others, and I also uploaded some digital pictures of myself. So just my own, which I know is true, right? So in these forensic tools, I was seeing some aberrations even in my own pictures, because digital pictures are always going to have some distortions. But I couldn't, and I'm not a photo forensics expert, but following very careful tutorials that are online, I was not able to detect any obvious, error analysis. There was just nothing obvious when you made the block size large enough that if it was a fake photo, there would be much, much more type of obvious things.
Whoa, okay. So right off the bat there, if you give somebody a photo of Bigfoot and they can't detect any aberrations, does that mean the photo of Bigfoot is real? See, again, so this would be a burden of proof logical fallacy and an appeal to extremes logical fallacy, because he's stating that if it were fake, it needs to be obvious. I mean, not to mention the level of technology. If we go by the rule of thumb that so if the conspiracy is true, again, when you're examining a concept, you're not going to use the parameters of a different concept to disprove it. So, I mean, if somebody doesn't believe in God, they're not going to take the Bible as the word of God. So trying to use the Bible to prove God, that's not going to work. You can't use the parameter of that. So he's stating that the burden of proof is always on the one making a positive claim. So if you're claiming that a photo of the Earth is real, that a photo of Bigfoot is real, that a photo of a demon is real, whoever's making the positive claim, the burden of proof is on them, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So, and then also appeal to extremes, because if it's faked, it has to be obvious. If we go by the rule of thumb that the military is roughly 50 years ahead in terms of technology, possibly far greater, I mean, who knows? I mean, Moore's law, the exponential development of computer tech, if they're so incredibly advanced, you wouldn't necessarily detect aberrations, but whether you would or you wouldn't, again, that doesn't change the burden of proof. So two fallacies right off the bat for Bryant there.
There's ways to cheat that though, right, Brian? Like for instance, if I take a photograph of a photograph, it will always be perfect on air level analysis because there is no differential there. It's going to look like a perfect picture, even though I took a picture of a fake photograph, right?
Right. Well, but the point is I'm not claiming that these are proof of anything. But when you say they're not proof, it's the same for you guys. So your photo.
Whoa. It's not the same. Because again, we're going basic logic 101, children's level logic. The burden of proof is on positive claims. I use this example all the time. If someone says there's an invisible flying spaghetti monster and he's going to kill everybody if we don't pay taxes to the invisible flying spaghetti monster, maybe the invisible flying spaghetti monster really is up there. And maybe the invisible flying spaghetti monster really will destroy everybody if we don't pay taxes to it. But there's no reason to believe it scientifically if the burden of proof is not presented. So it's not the same for both sides. So Bryant here with a fundamental lack of understanding on basic children's level logic regarding burden of proof and positive claims. I'm actually a little surprised here because he seems like a genuine nice guy. Now, obviously that doesn't mean he's smart, but that usually means that there's some kind of ego checking. Like, for example, goofs like so-called Professor Dave, Simon Dan, all those Dunning-Kruger goofs, their Dunning-Kruger is so extreme and off the charts, and their ego has them on such short strings. And they're also extreme narcissists where they can't consider that they're wrong. This guy seems to be, again, it could all be an act. I'm not saying he's not the best actor ever, but he seems genuine. And he seems genuine and nice enough to possibly consider that he might be wrong. I'm a little surprised that he doesn't have at least a basic command of logical fallacies.
Forensics analysis is just as unscientific as someone trying to prove that they're real because digital photos, unless you get the actual original photo and you actually get a photo forensics expert, and you can see, let me just...
Well, that would be an appeal to authority. You can find experts on both sides of every issue. You can't defer to the expert. That's like deferring to some priest at a church on whether or not he's speaking to God. Well, you're not the expert, so you don't know if God is real and he talks to priests. So let's go talk to the priest. If the priest confirms it, and then if his peers, if it's peer-reviewed, if you go to other churches and other priests also confirm God exists, and they possibly can speak to God, if it's all peer-reviewed from the priests, does that mean it's real? Obviously not. I mean, this is children's level basics.
And it would be true that the only pictures of Earth that even science would claim to be true would be the ones from the moon landing, right? Everything else could not be a photograph because it would be a digital representation sent as data.
Okay, right, a digital. But again, we live in a digital age, so I want to get to some of the more current. And I don't want to focus so much on the moon landing photos, but just so you know, I mean, there is a lot to photo forensics. So when you just go out there and say that these are all, well, I've used photo forensics and I've shown that it's not true, or that it's whatever. I've heard you guys say stuff like that. In a court of law, you actually have to hire. And I looked into hiring a photo forensics expert just to prove my point.
Again, in a court of law, any kind of positive position, if you're trying to prove, I mean, this goes beyond the shape of the Earth. Let's just assume everybody's on the same page and the Earth is a globe. Let's just assume that just for 1 second. In a court of law, if you're presenting something positive, you can't just show photos of whatever. You have to prove that it's real. So if these photos from space that are admittedly manipulated or CGI by the manipulator, not to mention if NASA is the accused, you're not going to take their word for it. I use this example all the time. If an accused murderer is going to bring their own surveillance photos, even if they're real, like they're coming from the accused. So Bryant also doesn't understand conflict of interest. Also, this red herring deflection, oh, well, we live in a digital age. That doesn't mean anything. How is that? How does that address the burden of proof on the photos being presented by the accused? I mean, a lot of fallacies here right off the bat. So this is not off to a good start for Bryant.
They were too expensive, so I didn't. But they're expensive, first of all. That holds up in a court of law. And he told me that digital photos, there's really no way you can really prove it. But you do things like this. You got to go through many different there's like many steps. You can look at the photo forensics, but then you got to look at the metadata, look at, there's like a lot that goes into photo forensics. So the only way that I would believe, or I think we all should be critical here, that what you're saying that you've done photo forensics and you've shown the moon landing photos to be false, is that you have to hire a professional photo forensics expert.
No, you don't. Again, appeal to authority, logical fallacy. If you haven't checked out the Apollo Missions podcast on the MINDSHOCK series, I go over a lot of anomalies and then also EMF extraction, which shows artificial lighting in the so-called moon landing photos. I mean, That's pretty much as proof positive you can get that that was shot in a studio, unless you can come up with an alternate explanation on why man-made electromagnetic frequency, or why electromagnetic frequencies are emanating from man-made light sources on the moon landing footage. So again, check out that podcast. But again, this just fundamental lack of understanding of burden of proof on top of appeal to authority logical fallacies. Because again, he wants to get an expert. We can go get a priest at a church. An expert in God will tell you that God is real. So it's really strange that a guy. Because again, Bryant actually seems humble enough and nice enough to examine alternative positions. I mean, he's here willing to do a good faith, what I assume is a good faith debate and discussion. And Jeranism, Hibbler, David, or Witsit, they can comment on whether they felt that it was good faith in the moment while they were discussing with him. But either way, I mean, it's really weird that he doesn't understand these children's level logical fallacies.
And I want to see those documents. I want to know who it is. And I want to see what their analysis is. Just for one of you guys to say it is not convincing.
And that would be a genetic logical fallacy as well, because he thinks information's convincing based on who's presenting it, as opposed to what is being presented. So this is just not off to a good start. And I really feel bad for the guy, because he seems like a nice guy. And Austin Witsit here is lying in wait to attack, and it might not be pretty when he finally does.
Bryant, that picture you're showing us, NASA has a 24-hour stop motion, just a whole bunch of pictures where it's spinning.
Oh yeah.
How come they never show the moon in that? The moon should come around, and you can't say it's out of line because it's a full Earth. The sun is behind the camera.
The Discovery has shown the whole moon. I mean, they had the image of the moon going right past.
Yeah, one time. Mm-hmm.
Well, still, I mean, you say that they
Can
have.
we pull that up? Can someone?
Yeah.
Do you think that one looks legit, Brian?
Right.
I've done analysis.
This one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, I can tell you something about that. The reason you see the red, the green when you look at doing air analysis,
Yes, the three colors.
is because they had to take separate images because it's moving so fast and combine it into one. So again, you got to realize the moon is going really fast across the Earth. So what they did is they took 3 snapshots in 3 different colors and they combined it into one image. Okay. So that's why if you do an air analysis.
What do you mean really? Why would it be really fast though?
Right.
The moon is going pretty darn fast.
2,000 miles per hour relative to the size of the Earth isn't fast if you're that far out.
Wow. Okay, that puts it in perspective.
And also, why
Well,
isn't the moon lit? Why isn't the moon lit? It should be a full moon.
There's the money shot.
Well, I've seen some of those things. I off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there's different. The cameras that are taking the images, if you open the exposure too much, then you end up getting overexposed on the Earth. If you do it too little, then the moon gets. You got to find a compromise.
But look, we have a full Earth, and the Earth is lit up.
So that would be a non-congruent logical fallacy, because he's. You have to show that in both instances and then show the difference between, because this, to me, this just looks like the Earth actually looks like it could be real here to me. The moon looks like it's clearly been like copy pasted from paint. Like it doesn't even, I mean, it's not even close.
The moon is closer to the camera. Only a quarter of a million miles closer.
I'm not a photographer, Dave. So
right.
So again, he's not a photographer, but he's still notice how he's still presenting the argument. He's still grasping those straws to try to explain away how this footage is real or could be real with religious blind faith. And you could hear the religious fervor in his voice while he's simultaneously arguing he's not an expert. So why is he even attempting to defend this? He could just say, okay, I don't know why it looks like that. It could be real. I'm not denying it's real. Maybe it is real. It just looks kind of fake, especially the moon. The moon looks like it was copy-pasted from paint. Maybe that's just me. The Earth looks okay. It looks kind of decent. But the moon just, I mean, that's not even good graphics. I mean, that's pretty poor.
I do know enough that when you guys say, oh, no stars on the moon, I mean, you guys know, come on, you guys know that that's overexposure, right? The reason that you don't see stars when the moon landing photos is because if you open up the exposure, you're going to end up with, it's going to be too bright. I mean,
And it's kind of weird. As a light expert, he doesn't address all the multiple light sources on the moon that, again, once you factor in the EMF extraction, their studio lights, but so clearly it doesn't look like that. And people actually have done tests in various surfaces. Again, you could say, okay, the lack of atmosphere would affect this or that, but you can do tests yourself at night in the desert with dust, with or without studio lights, and see the difference. So obviously there is a lot with exposure, but you would think they would at least take different shots in different exposures to show different things, which again, if you're involved, I mean, if you're claiming they went not once, but all these moon missions, they went to the moon all these times, you would think there would be some kind of I mean, if they have time to play golf, they can take a couple different shots at different exposures.
I hear what you're saying there. I just throw in my 2 cents. One of our guys in Thailand, Phuket Word, he went out with his iPhone 4. iPhone 4, an old iPhone, and he stood underneath a street light and he aimed the camera at the street light, so it was blinding the camera, and he could see stars behind the street light. Well, how come when they're on the moon facing away from the sun into the dark sky, they couldn't see a single star?
There are, again, you can do similar experiments and show different results too. So I'm not going to take just one n equals 1 experiment. See, I don't like these as a scientist. As an n equals 1 means I got a scientific study, then it's just one person in the statistical. You're basically doing statistics on one person.
Well, that's also what he did regarding the moon landing. He's saying you can't see stars because of the exposure when you have a lot of evidence to the contrary. Not to mention the fact that they could have easily taken different shots at different exposures. I mean, that's what anybody does. That's what any explorer, they climb a mountain, whatever, at night to start. I mean, you're going to take shots. I mean, even if you're an amateur, like we're not even talking about professionals with billions of dollars at the exposure. You're an amateur. You're going to do a couple different shots at different exposures. I mean, that's just natural to do that, especially if you're on this mission of what is the greatest accomplishment of all mankind.
But pretty much anybody,
like you said, it's not proof.
15. You need at least 15 for a good statistical study. I used to teach statistics, so I know that.
I'm pretty sure anybody could go on their street with street lights, point their iPhone camera at the sky, and pick up the stars. I don't think. Well,
again, you can do that, but you can also, if you're trying to. But street lights are not. It's not. You can't say that that's the same thing as being on the moon.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with you.
Okay,
I actually agree with you. So like you said, it's not proof for anything. To me, that's one of the fakest looking things I've ever seen in my life. So it doesn't cut it for me.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, you can. And again. I'm not a photo forensics expert, but I did spend a fair amount of time going through as much as I could. It's like, okay, there's not convincing evidence that it's not real. Can I prove it's real? No, I'm not a photo forensics expert, but I'm not convinced that they're unreal is what I'm getting at. And
there were many experts that said that the pictures from the moon landings weren't real, and they went in depth and did
show me the experts. I want a list of those names.
You can go to allist.com. They're all PhDs. AUL.
Okay, well, send me the link because there's plenty of people on the other side that.
And this is why appeal to authority is a logical fallacy. And the fact that Bryant doesn't know it, it's so weird. Like, how does he not understand the basics, the children's level 101 logic? I mean, yeah, this is tough, and it's tough for a whole bunch of different reasons, and I'm actually starting to suspect that this might not be as entertaining as I thought, because when you're watching, like, so-called Professor Dave getting destroyed by David Weiss, or some of these other debates where these scientism cultists and goofs are getting obliterated by flat earthers, which, if flat earth's not even true, that makes it even funnier, but regardless of what's true or not true, that's not the point of this. I mean, Bryant seems like such a nice guy. His cluelessness might not be as entertaining, but let's continue anyways.
Yeah, sure. Of course, but you asked for people on this side.
Okay, so again, this is the whole picture thing, but what I want to get into now is something called with the new satellites that we have now around the world that are able to take whole disk images. Again, we say disk because.
So is that a circular reasoning logical fallacy? Because he's presupposing they're actually what they claim to be, and that that what they're taking is actually what he's claiming. I mean, it's a multi-layered circular reasoning logical fallacy.
You can't get a 360-degree image of the Earth, but they're taking these now every 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. And they're getting what's called truth observations, guys. So you can actually, like the Himawari 8 has been able to detect fires from space and to help with sort of the direction of the fires going. So we're getting now live images from these satellites.
Hold on, they're not live though. They're not live.
Oh, no, they're not live, but they're taking every 15 minutes. Yeah, you got to wait. There's a delay, right?
So
then it's not live, is it? Live means it's live. Wow. I don't know Jeranism. I haven't really seen, I don't know if he does debates. I haven't seen him before, but he seems to be quite sharp. I mean, he responds pretty quickly. I'm still waiting for Witsit to unleash. He's just looking there poised. He's like a crouching tiger ready to attack and obliterate everything in his path. And when he does, it's probably going to be really good.
So can I interject here for?
But you're telling me that hundreds of pictures every day are fake?
But
Yes.
what?
Appeal to incredulity, logical fallacy. Yeah. Have you ever heard of Hollywood movies? I mean, there's a lot of fake stuff out there.
Why would it take any amount of time?
What's the point? I mean,
Oh, appeal to motive. Wow, he's going rapid fire with these fallacies now.
But what's the point of taking 15 minutes to get us
I
an
know,
image?
but you can.
But no, hold on.
you can-
Answer me that
listen,
first, though. Why would you ever accept 15 minutes late for an image of the Earth? How long would
I
it
mean,
take?
it's got to take. But listen, you can take a picture with your clock at a certain, a really unique cloud formation. You can go on Himawari 8 or Go 16, and you can see that same cloud formation.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So let
You can get truth confirmations like this from space.
all right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna break
you're-
your
you're
paradigm
really-
on this.
you're
You
really
have to let
saying-
me
you're
talk on this one.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to show you some research that we did on the Himawari 8. How come that's hiding there? Hold on. Transition. Here we go. So
And I'll
this
just-
is, we found a server. Jaron, jump in at any time.
Yeah.
Either whistleblower or somebody found us an FTP server with tens of thousands of folders on it with images from the Himawari 8. And they had a blue marble, a regular blue marble model, and then it had flat images of world radar. And it was showing how they wrap it around a sphere. This is a NASA FTP server. I'm just going to jump forward a little bit here. And so here's one of the maps they use with the weather on it. These are images that were on these servers. And then, so check this out. This one is, they got the blue marble. They wrap the weather data around it, okay? And we take it a little farther. This is the folders that we got it out of, off of their FTP server. And then they added a terminator line, right? They added a terminator line. So here's the question for you. If this is a real image from the Himawari 8, how did we see the clouds over here? When we go back here, there are the clouds.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of this kind of stuff, Dave. I would have to see the files and everything.
Wait, do what kind of stuff? A lot of this kind of stuff? Like destroy his argument? I mean, again, this has nothing to do with, I'm going to claim here it has nothing to do with flat or globe. They want it to look like a globe for whatever reason, whether it is or it isn't. It looks cooler that way, right? If it looks cooler, people do weird types of graphics for even boring stuff, okay? Like inside the TV studio, they'll add dramatic lighting and shadows. That doesn't mean like whatever, the shape of the studio isn't what it is. They just added whatever they wanted to add to make it look the way they wanted to look. But Dave Weiss, that's very interesting because if that's all legitimate, if everything he just brought up with the FTP servers, if that's all legitimate, I mean, that completely demolishes Bryant's argument, and all he can respond is with, you do a lot of this kind of stuff. Like what? Present facts? Because if it's empirically verifiable, I didn't go to the server. If David Weiss can provide all those URL links and show the Terminator line and all that crap, if he can do all that, and so far, I don't know if I've found him to be lying. Like the links he had with the infrared footage and all that, those were all legitimate. Now, what that proves, that's a completely separate argument. But the information he's providing, if he's saying it can be found on their FTP server and that's verified, then that's verified. Now, again, that doesn't mean that the Earth isn't a globe and it's flat. That just means they want it to look like a cool sphere with shadows and all that, and they're taking all the data that they're taking from either high-altitude balloons or satellites, whatever, on whatever the shape of the Earth is. That doesn't really prove anything either way. That Bryant just seems really triggered that things are not as they appear.
Before I can comment on that, because I'm not
Understood, but
I'm
let me
not
ask you a
gonna take
question.
all that at face value.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If we showed you the server, the NASA file server, where they're loading these pictures every 10 or 15 minutes, would you be willing to concede that, yes, it could be faked? It
could be composite. Composite.
So hang on.
Well,
hang
it
on.
is composite,
Here's my
for
question.
sure.
You agree that there's radar stations all over the world that could map out on a flat map all of the weather patterns in real time. So they can take that data, and no human has to be involved with this, wrap it around a globe, put a Terminator line on it, and send it over to NASA
That would
every 10 or 15
I don't know, Dave.
minutes.
That would take
Hey,
10 or 15
on
minutes to
Earth.
do that.
No, it wouldn't. It would take 1 second to do because AI now can draw a picture from a description that you make and make it look photorealistic.
Yes.
So
know,
this is
well,
nothing.
But they're coming from the wrong direction. This is looking straight down on the Earth. I mean, I don't buy that.
Coming from the wrong. What is he talking about? Coming from the wrong direction? If there's satellites or whatever, high altitude, whatever's taking the imagery, I don't think anybody's disputing that there's some kind of high altitude imagery being recorded. Whatever the shape of the Earth. I don't think anybody's disputing that there's at least something up there taking photos and video. Whether it's satelloons, whether it's actual satellites, whatever it is, it's up there. I don't think anybody's disputing that. Now, what is he talking about different angles? If they're taking it from different sides, I mean, obviously they'd be all over the world regardless of shape, and they'd be recording everything. So what, I mean, that was really, really bizarre. Coming from the wrong side, I mean, what kind of logical, I mean, that's just a nonsensical logical fallacy. Like, what is he talking about? He's just making up nonsense?
Brian, can I ask you a question? Genuinely curious. So, like, because everyone says it's live, and it's not, right?
I know
We
it's
just
not
discussed
live.
it.
It's every.
But
I
wait,
know it's
wait,
delayed.
Mike, I just got a question for you. So, if it's say every 10 minutes, right? Say it takes that long to send it and receive it. How come sometimes when we go check it, it's like 25 minutes late?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
usually there.
I don't know this. I've checked that too. I don't know the servers, but I mean, you can do truth observations. I don't buy that the radar on the ground can take these 11K quality photos. I'm sorry, guys. I mean, these are 11,000 by 11,000 pixel photos.
Wait, why would that be relevant to where the camera is? What is he talking about? I mean, these are really, I mean, I don't buy. I mean, what is that, an appeal to incredulity? It doesn't make any sense, though. Not to mention, if they are taken from high altitude, I mean, did David Weiss say, he said they were taken from radar stations, and mapped into the data and wrapped around a globe. But even if they were taking it from satelloons or satellites, like, what's the difference? You take it, it's put into the program to make it look like a cool 3D spherical Earth, regardless on what the true shape is, just because it looks cooler. That doesn't prove anything one way or another. But again, Bryant is so triggered almost for the sake of being triggered because of his authority-worshipping cultist status. He just can't handle that it's not as it appears. It doesn't prove a flat Earth in any way, but notice how he can't even handle that, what David Weiss presented.
Hold on. There's
you're
stitch
telling me-
lines. You can see the stitch lines inside the Himawari 8. So
Yeah,
they're
if
not
you zoom
11.
in, you see where it's stitched
You see,
together.
they're
literally on
purple
their
stitch.
website.
I can show you if you want.
Yeah, zoom in.
Well,
Someone zoom
here,
in on it.
I'm gonna show you.
Jaron,
Can you see this?
Let
Are you
Jaron bring it
looking
up.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah,
No.
that's
All
your
right,
screen.
So
Go
this
ahead.
is Himawari. It's live. I'm just going to find a full picture of the side. Okay, right there is pretty good. So now if we zoom in here, we're going to see that as you get really close. Come on.
Okay, so I can see that on any Himawari image you're telling me, or is it just
Yep.
this one?
No, everyone.
Yes.
Everyone.
This
Every
is
single
live.
one.
This is right
Every
now.
single
live.
one.
This is the live. So if you go in here, you have to get real close, and I'll show you where.
I'll look at it. I'll take a look at that myself. But I'm
Yeah,
See
well,
right
let's
here?
take a look now.
See right here, this
See
right
what
here.
we
I
see.
can't really see.
Well,
Oh,
you
you
can.
can't see that
Because it's
sharing
real
my
small
screen.
for him, yeah. Do you? Yeah.
Oh, I can. Yeah, see right here. Oh, wait. Am I not sharing on the share screen? Oh, yeah, no.
No.
But
No.
You
but
can see that
guys
line.
do know that even I mean,
You can see this line though. Yes, there's a purple line. Right here.
I can't see it. I mean,
It's
that's
really
the problem.
small for him.
That's the problem.
Yeah, but it's small for me. I can see. All right. Well,
Okay,
you
well,
can see right
I-
here, and look at right here and here. So there's just go along the edge, and you'll see there's another one there.
Okay, well, just leave
Okay.
that as an open.
The other
top.
thing, just one other thing about Himawari that I find extremely questionable is if you find on any count, whatever the full moon is,
Yeah.
you should see the full moon come around the back of the Earth, and you never see it. And you never see it. Of course, you're not going to see it cross in front, but behind.
There's probably again. I'll look at. There's probably a good reason for that. But
Well,
again,
I mean, we could always say that about
Let's-
anything. But there's not.
Appeal to ignorance. There's probably a good reason. So he doesn't know whether there's a good reason or not. Now, maybe there is, but he's already presupposing and assuming the opposite of being scientific. He's being religious in his claims. There's probably a good reason. Now, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But he's saying there probably is without any actual basis for it.
There's
let's
not.
just move-
What could possibly be
No,
a good
of course.
reason why they wouldn't show you the moon going behind the Earth?
Well, the big question that I always bring up with people is like, we have these high resolution images that are hundreds and hundreds are coming in every day, and the flat Earth, there is no full flat Earth disk from space photo. So
Of course
if
not.
you guys place these standards on, hold up, I mean those high.
Wait, what? What? That's one massive deflection, shifting the burden of proof, but mainly classified under the tu quo q logical fallacy, basically just saying that the other person also does that instead of addressing the actual claim. But it's also built on top of a straw man. He's stacking these fallacies because flat earthers aren't arguing that there are satellites really far distant in space that would be capable of taking these photos, and presupposing that it's not an infinite plane, so there would be no way to take the photo in the first place, even if space was real, which I don't know. I mean, some flat earthers might say it's real. So Bryant here is now stacking multiple fallacies on top of each other. It's kind of impressive in that regard.
High elevation. I want to go through the high elevation.
We don't think Earth's a disk in space.
Brian,
man. That's wild.
Brian, do you think that we think we're a disk in space, floating in space?
I'm just saying, even with even getting to a high enough elevation to where you can see the wall. But let's get into that later.
We don't think we can get up high enough to even get a couple states in frame.
And we don't think there's a wall at the end of the Earth.
No.
We don't think there's a wall at the end of the Earth.
The Kobayashi map is real, which is actually from probably a fictional.
I'm not saying the Kobayashi map is real. What I'm saying is we live on a plane. Antarctica, as far as they let us go, we don't know what's beyond Antarctica.
We'll get to Antarctica. Can we just move on? Because I mean,
yeah, these are showing pictures, so we can move on.
Just real quick,
like showing me.
I looked up. This is September 10th. There's no moon.
Austin Witsit should move on from showing me cartoons. I mean, that's a good point too. I mean, why is Bryant spending all this time even on images? This guy's a physicist and he wants to bring up images? I mean, why not use actual laws of physics and experiments instead of possibly faked images from the accused? I mean, that's kind of weak in and of itself. I mean, even if you could prove they were real, I mean, if that's all he has, that's kind of weak for a physicist, just to rely on only this aspect. That's kind of weird.
Sometimes Dave does the which ball thing, and I think you know, Dave, that you can get a camera and different angles of fields of view. You can get different the side. I took this myself, so I've seen this with my own eyes with my own camera. So I'm not lifting this image from anybody. This is with my own little globe. And just by using a 15 millimeter and a 45, I was easily able to show that depending on, Discover's 980,000 miles away, some of like the Apollo shots are maybe 28,000 miles or whatever it was miles away. You're going to get different, the continents are going to look different sizes. You guys get that, right?
I totally get that, but not to the extent that they show us. For example.
Well, hold on a second, Mr. Bryant. If you take a photo of, let's say, a basketball that says Spalding on it, is the size of the lettering going to be proportionally different to the stitching based on where you take or how far away you take the shot from? Okay, my respect for Bryant just dropped a lot because this is one of the silliest arguments. You're not going to get, Spalding is not going to look twice as big without the size of the ball changing. And the size of the ball is not going to change depending on how far or how close you are relative to the Spalding logo. I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's very simple to understand. You could do this experiment. Go to like a giant soccer field or whatever, put down a basketball with Spalding and take the shot from 10 feet away with different lenses in different lighting conditions, at different angles, at different exposures. Do it all around, or let's say a football field. Put it at the half line and take it every 10 yards from each end zone, from the crowd, from above. Spalding is not going to, the letter S is not going to take up the entire size of the ball. I mean, this is so fallacious. I might need a coffee break right now.
Example right here, Jaron, if you can make me big so he can see.
Yeah, I'm just doing this fast.
This is the United States right here. And so this circle represents about this much land. And you're saying just because we don't see don't see the whole side, all of this other land is on the other side. Okay. Now we could argue, oh, that's what you do think it. But then we see stuff like this from NASA, right? And people are like, well, that's the globe. Well, that's not the globe. This is clearly a fisheye lens. We're not going to disagree on that. You got that. But this is the one that gets me right here. Where, let me just pull it up. Hold on. Give me a second. It's got to resize this real quick. So whether we're seeing the full edge or not, because we're close, it's looking big. So maybe we're looking at that close one that you have. We can measure this because we can drive across Mexico and go across here and measure this, and it's 934 miles. Well, the diameter of the Earth, right? The diameter of the Earth is 7,917 miles. This little red line here, I should be able to fit 8.5 times in between these two lines. You can't claim that is because we're closer or farther from the Earth.
Look at Africa right here. I mean, this is obviously, we know the diameter of the Earth and the radius, and obviously Africa looks like it's taking up the whole side of the hemisphere.
Yeah.
Because of the field of view. Walter Bislin has some very careful tools that you can use to get views of the Earth from different fields of view, from different distances. And you see, when you use this tool, it's very mathematical, you get all these differing sizes and proportions.
I agree. He's right. Flat earthers are wrong.
Okay, so I'm not a major expert in photography or videography, but the basics of, I've done some amateur photography. The field of view basics, this is very easy. This is basically children's level stuff. Now you can see, just look up Simplified Guide to Field of View, and you could see clearly, for example, in this building, on this roof, it's proportional. So regardless of which lens you're using at which distance you are, different things, for example, this chimney relative to this window, you're always going to be able to fit the same amount of chimneys in the window. Now, the field of view is only going to change. It's proportional. So it'll change everything equally unless something is very close to the camera or, let's say, halfway between the Earth and the camera. So if there was, for example, a satellite in front of the Earth on these images, the size of the satellite and then the Earth could be affected because of the distance. But you just have the Earth far away, just like the basketball. Like if you take a basketball and then a football and a golf ball and put them at different distances and take different photos, yes, then one ball could appear a different size than the other. But all the parts of each ball will be proportional to each other. Like the size of the lettering is not going to change to the size of the same ball. So field of view really comes into play when things can look different sizes. When you have more than one thing, you have something in the foreground, background, midground. That's clearly not the case here because it's just the Earth far away. Now, there are, of course, aberrations in lenses. So there could be slight aberrations, for example, in mountain ranges. The mountain ranges might pop out and might be slightly bigger, but you would never get any of this mass deviation that we see because there would only be slight differences because even if they're using completely different lenses, again, proportionally, if they're getting the whole Earth in the shot. If they're not, like the shot, I think David Weiss just had a shot that was a lot closer with just Saudi Arabia. That forget about that because that's not showing the entire Earth. So that you could have some clear differences there. Nobody's talking about that. We're talking about shots that have the Earth in full view with massively different sized continents. So this is, I don't know how many fallacies this is. This is a straw man, a non sequitur, a red herring. He's just clearly misapplying field of view here.
Whenever they say that some of the pictures look like they're different size continents, that it proves they're all fake because you can't get the same effect on a sphere. You're correct.
Yeah, correct. It's the same thing with the color, Jabe. You know that different cameras can take different perspectives. So just because one looks one color,
I never claim the color. I just say they all look horrible. But
talk about different colors.
I never claim that. I say they're all different. Which one do you like?
Which one's real? Like it's just a joke because they're all fake.
Which one do you like? It's because they're different perspectives, different cameras. They just
different cartoons.
Well, okay, let's just move on. So I don't think we're going to get much further than that on this point.
I'm not sure what Austin Witsit made point that continents could look different sizes. Yes, slightly, of course. Just again, because of different lighting conditions, different aberrations in different lenses. Again, you can experiment with that and do it yourself, but they would be very, very slight. You wouldn't just get North America at half the globe. That could never happen if you're far enough away. If you're really close and the Earth is not in full view, so for example, from the ISS or from certain claimed satellites, when it's so close that you can't see the entire Earth, you could get massively different sizes, but not at such a distance that the full Earth is in view. Again, you can do this experiment with a basketball, and the basketball logo will not magically appear twice as big. The ball itself, including the logo, will proportionately can appear twice as big or whatever. So they'll both proportionately be bigger or smaller depending on lenses. Nobody's arguing that.
So
We agree. It's just not proof either way, right? We gotta.
Okay, now listen, I do know your model. I didn't mean to say you going beyond the dome and taking a picture of the whole disk. What I meant was if the sun, and again, I don't know, I hear different things, Robotham and Eric DeBay say 3,000 miles is the sun above. I've heard Dave say that the sun is somewhere else and it's a projection. So I get, nobody seems to know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah,
And
we
again,
don't know.
imagine if
I know, but if the sun is 3,000 miles up, why not just send something up there to take a look at it? I mean,
because
We
nobody's
can't
ever
go
been 3,000
miles
miles
up. You can't even get the
But-
jet
but-
fuel
but-
to go 60 miles up. The government has to approve you to even shoot a rocket 30 miles up. You can't just go 3,000 miles up. I don't even.
go I've studied rocket propulsion in Georgia Tech. You can go 3,000 miles up.
It's illegal.
I'm saying it privately, maybe, but I'm just saying there's probably ways to if this was really
Maybe the government will let us.
but you should be able to get high enough. So anyway, so is this kind of, I mean, now I know you guys think there's maybe other.
So that was a moving the goalpost logical fallacy, because he said you should easily be able to go 3,000 miles up. Then all of a sudden, oh yeah, privately you can't, so you actually can't, even though he just said you can. And then all of a sudden, oh okay, maybe you don't even need to get 3,000, but you should be able to go high enough. What is this vague high enough? I mean, just constantly moving the goalpost.
You guys think there's maybe other lands outside of the wall, but just can I agree? Can you agree with me? This is kind of the map that you guys use.
Sort of. I wouldn't base the
I mean-
continent sizes,
Well,
I
that's
wouldn't say
the thing
they're
is,
correct.
like, you guys can't seem to agree on like which map you want to use. I mean,
So when you
They
say
lied
that, though,
about the
hold on a
Earth,
second.
bro.
Do
How
you
we-
realize that when you guys discovered the globe or whatever, that every single mission, every single map that was drawn was government funded, completely and totally? There's no private research going out there and figuring out what the shape of the continents were. It's all government funded. So to come at us and say, well, you don't have everything mapped is ridiculous. And yeah, we don't have any government assistance. So
That would also be shifting the burden of proof logical fallacy, because if he's claiming it's a globe, he's saying the burden of proof is on someone to disprove any of these maps. Like, even if you look at flat Earth maps, so there's like a million different flat Earth maps, he's saying that's a problem. Because there's so many different ones, you should have a perfectly accurate one. As if that has anything to do with falsifying the globe, which I'm assuming that they're trying to do. So really, really weird stuff here.
no, but we've mapped the world. I'm not trying to be, again, I'm
Well,
But
you
who's
think you've
we,
mapped the
Brian?
world.
Who's we?
When you say we, who is we?
Well, that's an appeal to authority. They've mapped the world, and he just took it on faith that it was an accurate map.
You said we mapped
Again,
the world. Who is we?
to just disregard like everything that history has told us. I mean,
Reification logical fallacy. He's just grouping in all these appeal to authorities of all these concepts somehow magically prove that the map is accurate.
I agree that maybe
Not
there's
everything.
some distortions in history, but I mean,
Right.
Science and I'm not a cartographer. I'm not a map expert. I just want to know like what map you guys use.
Well, here we don't have an exact map. For me, I'm a fan of the Gleason's map. This is a representation of the Gleason's map on my clock app. And what's that? Here, the one thing I want to say is, whatever time of day it is, if you look at where the sun is. So when the sun's over here, I can call my friend PK up and say, "Hey, what time is it? Where's the sun?" He'd be like, "Oh, it's noon, and the sun's right above me." And then 6 hours later, I call somebody in over here in Africa, and they'll be like, "Oh, the sun's right above me." Right? So there's something truthful about this because the sun goes around, and this shows you where the sun is at noon for each location.
right.
Right,
Which-
but the thing is that's not accurate because you can point like Wolfie6020 did a video where he shows your app.
no, he's wrong
He-
because Wolfie doesn't understand how east and west work on the globe. So,
Well, I mean,
well,
we
I
can show you
we can
when
try
you're
to show
ready.
you.
I think anybody can find a way to go outside and point and see that the sun is not exactly.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, but you might think that.
Can you point west right now?
Well, if I had again, we can get a compass and do a test. We
You
don't have to
can't
know
point
exactly-
west. West is right where you are. Anything past that is south.
Okay, well, I don't know.
Do you want me to show you? Do you want me to show you? Because I know you want
Let
to.
Jaron show you a quick demonstration, and then we'll go right back. Is that okay? Or you want to press on?
I just want to show you
I
why.
don't want to press on. I don't.
Let him press on.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, let's let them get a little
So
bit
we can
more.
just go. So I mean, the Gleason map, and I know you guys. I mean, the point that I have is this is an azimuthal projection of a sphere, and I've heard Dave say that no, the sphere is a you can't. It doesn't go that way. Projections from higher dimensions to lower dimensions, you lose information when you have 2D. So you can't just say, oh, we took the 2D. And
Wait, so you're saying if let's say we discovered a flat Earth and we all got together and said, hey, let's make this so it's a sphere. You're saying it's impossible for us to put that on a sphere?
This is a perfect azimuthal project.
Well, of course, wouldn't it be though? Hold on, you're not listening to what I said. If we showed up, saw flat land, decided to put it on a sphere, then if people later in life took the sphere and laid it out as a flat map, that's all possible.
Okay, but you guys do know that there's been globes around. I mean, I've heard you say that
the oldest globe is 1492.
Okay,
oldest
fine,
globe.
but I'm just saying that I've heard you guys say. I mean, I've studied a lot of flat Earth history, so I do know the fact that.
But Aristophanes and those guys, they knew that the Earth was a sphere, and they just nobody ever decided to make one.
I know, but the geocentric model and the Ptolemaic model was, even in the darkest of the dark ages, the educated world embraced the globe, even though they thought it was the center of the universe. And this is a very well documented historical fact. And I disagree when you guys say, "Oh yeah, it was taught in schools."
So why were we taught about Columbus sailing the ocean blue and discovering the Earth was round?
Well, listen, that's actually based on what's the author's name that wrote the book? That's actually a fictional account. He actually fictionalized Columbus's. There's this really good.
Okay, so he just proved the point against himself. So exactly how much has been fictionalized? Of course, the victors write the history books. If the conspiracy is true, obviously that would all be fraudulent. Not to mention there's a whole lot of other fraudulent history. So, but magically, this wouldn't be fraudulent. Is that Bryant's position? Just another appeal to authority, magically hallucinating that this is all well documented and the documents could not have been forged in any way because no documents have ever been forged in history, right? I mean, this guy's pretty goofy. I mean, what can we say? He's pretty goofy.
So why? One guy wrote a book. One guy wrote a book, and then it showed up in schools and it showed up in textbooks.
No, I know that is an unfortunate thing that happened, but he never sailed across to discover the world was flat. I mean, they knew the world was a globe. In fact, what they thought, though, because this is before Newton, they thought that they had to go over the hump, and they actually underestimated the size of the globe.
But so Aristophanes knew it.
They did believe it was a globe. Well, I know, but maybe they didn't have
Maybe they didn't have the So he's like, oh, they knew for a fact. They knew that, but maybe this and maybe that. Obviously, he has no clue what they knew. Nobody does. If you weren't around back then, you don't know. If there is some kind of conspiracy or cover-up, regardless of what the shape of the Earth is, maybe there's a cover, maybe it really is a globe, and that there was a flat Earth cover-up. And then maybe there was a cover-up for that. So again, regardless of what the shape is, if there was a cover-up, how would people know? And authority-worshipping cultists always hallucinate that, yeah, there could have been fraud before, but there's definitely none now because they're just that clueless about human nature. And, of course, scientific method and basic logic.
1,700 years later, they didn't...
Well, no, they had the idea of the globe, but they thought that they were going to have to go over the hump, to get to the. So they had this idea of the antipodes, which they didn't understand the South Pole. But then, of course, when Newton came along, that we understood it was gravity. So, but I mean, but there's pretty good historical evidence that the educated world since Eratosthenes.
The pretty good. That the educated were. So what is this? This is a no true Scotsman wrapped into an appeal to authority, wrapped into appeal to popularity.
So educated that they thought they were going over a hump. That's pretty educated.
That's all the proof they needed back then. No. That was the only proof.
Wait a minute.
Going down.
They didn't have Newton's equations. You got to realize that they didn't have the science to understand this yet. And yes, we can look back and say, well, why did they believe in antipodes? It's because they didn't know gravity at this point wasn't known. Okay.
So again, before we get into the gravity issue, so 500 years from now, all of this will be regarded as the same. So what this goofs like Bryant, these authority worshipping cultists, what they don't understand is we're not living in magical times now. In 500 years, what most of current knowledge, which is assumed to be true, and of course previous generations' knowledge is assumed to be limited, inaccurate, or flat out wrong, why would that change in 500 years? I mean, the authority-worshipping cultists, it's like they don't have the mental capacity to understand that 500 years from now, 5,000 years from now, the scientific understanding of the universe will be completely different. We're going to be looked at as the Dark Ages. Now, that doesn't mean everything's 100% false, of course, but it just means it's inaccurate, incomplete, or possibly totally false as well, depending on which concept you're talking about. And we might not even know, is there really a way to know that until technology and more laws of physics are discovered hundreds of years in the future when knowledge is exponentially ahead of what it is now, and we'll be all looked at a bunch of clueless goofs, regardless of what the shape of the Earth is.
Yeah, it was a religion. It was that the perfect shape was a sphere. So the Greeks proposed it philosophically. It was an ontological premise that the perfect shape was.
There hasn't been a time where we've embraced the flat Earth since you got to go back.
Brian, hold on a second. We don't know anything past the early 1900s, right? There's no one left to tell us. You've seen my interview with.
I've heard you say that. That's his counter to empiricism. And the scientific method of actually observing and experimenting and verifying. His counter is, I've heard you say that. Oh man, this is hilarious.
With Ruth, and there's people that say they were taught flat Earth and globe Earth in American public schools in the 1950s. Right? So this is not what we hold on a second.
So all he has is that's not true. So I'm not saying it is true, but to counter that's not true, that's the logical fallacy of argument by denial or denialism. Just simply ignoring an account. Now, maybe it's not true, again, but the point is you're denying someone's empirical experience. Now, that is an anecdotal logical fallacy because David Weiss here is bringing forth an anecdotal logical fallacy. But an anecdotal logical fallacy, he's not claiming 100% of people were taught this. This fallacy's he's saying some people. So let's say it's a vast, small minority, certain schools. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they were religious schools, whatever the case may be. It is, if they're telling the truth, it is true. That doesn't disprove all of the schools where it wasn't taught. So it's not exactly an anecdotal logical fallacy by David Weiss because he's not claiming that all of these schools, in these isolated instances, now what does that prove? That doesn't really prove anything. I mean, maybe you can find schools today that teach flat Earth. I mean, there's schools today that teach about demons and stuff, like spiritual schools, whatever. That doesn't mean it's not true. There could have been a public school in like some kind of religious area that did teach flat Earth in the 50s. How would Bryant know? He's just denied. Now, again, the burden of proof is on positive claims. People have actually posted textbooks. Again, I don't know if they're real or not. They have posted textbooks, I think, from the 20s or 30s. I don't think anybody's posted anything from the 1950s regarding flat Earth.
We didn't have instant communication. We had barely, back then, you could barely make a phone call across the state easily. So when they were switching over, what people believed, like if they did it here in Connecticut, some people in California, they wouldn't know what's going on. It could be a decade before they found out.
Oh, what's the name of that town? There was one town in the 1800s that did embrace what's it?
Zion.
Zion, yeah. That historically was the only town I could find that was well documented to have embraced the flat Earth in their education. I don't think that the educational system, I just don't buy it. We have been teaching the globe Earth for quite some time. And it didn't start in the 1900s.
Well, nobody said it did. I mean, how many straw mans is this guy going to stack?
All right, well, that doesn't mean anything.
I saw the interview with that lady, but she was 102 years old, Dave, and I mean, it wasn't very convincing.
This doesn't mean anything. If they were teaching the globe for 7,000 years, that doesn't mean it is a globe. So it doesn't mean.
Okay, I agree, but you guys just say that it's they've been teaching flat Earth up until the 1900s. That's just patently false.
Yeah, I don't say that.
Okay,
sorry,
well, yeah, they were a
on.
minority whenever Aristophanes supposedly existed. There's no primary documentation for that, so we were just going to move on to.
Okay, we can move on. You already agreed that this is not like a real map.
We did.
So I just want to talk about. We want to talk about that.
I don't know. I didn't know we agreed this.
Oh, the Kobayashi. Well, you bring up Kobayashi in the documentary Next Level, so that's the only reason why I put it there.
So it's been proven that it's a fake.
Well, you got to take in the context of the art. This is the article in the Hawaiian Gazette. Is that this was kind of the lost world sort of.
Okay.
It's kind of the time of that era where the lost world was a big thing to talk about, and everybody was fascinated by it.
Yeah, nobody's fascinated about Lost Worlds or Atlantis today. That was just only in that era, right, Bryant? I mean, I get no pleasure from pointing out Bryant's fallacies here. He seems like such a nice guy. So this isn't like analyzing, one of these goofs like Professor Dave or Simon Dan or Neil deGrasse Tyson, these Dunning-Kruger narcissistic goofs who are just, it's hilarious to watch them humiliate themselves with their utter cluelessness. But this guy's a nice guy. I mean, the fun's just not here. I mean, it's mostly just a strict logical analysis and my disbelief that Bryant, who seems like a functioning adult, just doesn't have these children's level basics when it comes to logic and logical fallacies, doesn't have a grasp of them.
So you had some of these fantastical accounts that sounded real that were published in newspapers, but yet were still based on a fictional thing. So,
well, maybe it was real. Sometimes ancestry passes down real stories.
This was the brother of the Kobayashi that drew this, and he did it just by hand. I mean, so it's.
Wait, so who was supposed to draw it? Somebody who wasn't connected to it and didn't have the knowledge? I mean, what? Obviously, I'm not claiming that anything is real. The burden of proof is on positive claims. Whoever's claiming it's real. So Witsit stated it correctly. Maybe it's real. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Who knows? Bryant is always falling for the appeal to incredulity logical fallacy, where he thinks whether he personally finds something convincing or not has any correlation to reality in any way. I mean, again, just fundamental lack of understanding of basic logic here.
When you really look at the evidence, it's just not very convincing that it's really based on anything real.
But Aristophanes with no primary documentation is convincing.
Actually, the Aristophanes, we can get to the sticks and shadows experiment, which I know you guys like to make fun of, but it's actually pretty darn convincing. But
wow. But and notice how he completely avoided Witsit's point about the documentation of it. In terms of first-hand documentation at the time of, not after the fact. And notice how he completely ignored that. Because let's say the experiment's bulletproof. Just for the sake of argument. Obviously that experiment doesn't prove anything. But let's say it did. Let's say it was a bulletproof experiment just for the sake of argument. Without the documentation that it actually took place, I mean, that's not convincing that it was actually, there's no evidence that it was actually done at the time they said it was done, even if it's bulletproof. But this goof still finds it convincing. Because authority-worshipping cultists, whatever their authorities, the Church of NASA, the Church of Academia, whatever universities they went to, they treat them as churches. So whatever they teach, whatever they preach, they regurgitate as gospel truth without questioning. Anything that's blasphemous against these teachings, they find that unconvincing.
It's not that we're making fun of it. It's that you're bringing up to our attention that this article in this newspaper, which, by the way, is hidden from the masses. Let's not act like everyone knows about this, okay? So this is hidden from the masses for a reason. But you're going to sit here and say, oh, you know what? This isn't real. It's just in some stupid paper. Well, everything you're reciting so far is in a stupid paper written by some stupid guy. So
the Rockefellers.
Okay,
yes.
Right. Okay, right. And again,
real.
You know that we've already established how I feel about the Rockefellers. We don't need to go there.
Because how he feels about something has some kind of correlation to reality. I mean, even if he agrees that the Rockefellers are, architects of social engineering and fraud and deceiving the masses, even if he agrees, I haven't heard him agree, but he said, we've already gone over how I feel about the Rockefellers, so maybe they're on the same page. I think David Weiss at the beginning said that they agree on everything except the shape of the Earth and the moon landing. So perhaps he's aware of the fraud of the Rockefellers, but whether that's true or not, notice how he's always talking about his feelings or what he personally finds convincing. I mean, why not use objective logic and reason in the scientific method? Why is he always talking about feelings and what he subjectively finds convincing? I mean, this is as anti-science as you can get.
Okay. Well, the globe idea was disliked. I mean, the teachers were fighting teaching this in school.
Again, that's not, I don't believe that history.
So newspapers, okay. So let's throw all
all I'm
newspapers
saying
out.
is if you're going to say something like that, you have to have more evidence interviewing a 102-year-old lady.
No, there are newspaper articles posted at the time that talk about them. So it's all, this is all sort of like not real
I'm telling
concrete
you,
anything.
I
though.
looked, and all I could find was Zion. It was the only place I could find that was teaching flat Earth.
So he admits that they were teaching it. So he's saying it was false that David Weiss made the claim, and yet he supported he found the verification that it was being taught in one particular area. David Weiss never made the claim that it was taught everywhere as the de facto default model. He simply said that flat Earth was taught. Not in 100% of schools. That claim was never made. He's not hallucinating to pretend to know that. And so is Bryant just deficient at basic English? Is that what the problem is here? Because he's corroborating what David Weiss said, that it was taught somewhere in schools. I mean, this is just sad. I mean, it's not even that funny. It's just kind of sad and pathetic.
There is really no evidence that it was being taught at all, going back to
who cares? Doesn't prove either way.
Who cares? But you guys do say that, so that's the only reason I brought it up. So,
yes, because that's what my research led me to.
Yeah, there's evidence that that it's not as old as the mainstream portrays, and there's no primary documentation for Eratosthenes, etc. But who cares either way?
Actually, Pliny. There is actually historical evidence when you look back. I will.
One guy out of the whole world.
It's still a story that you were told.
So hold on. Let Brian.
All history is a story.
Wait, so he has a problem with 102-year-old old lady who's living now, giving what she believes to be her account. He says it's not credible. Whatever. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm not going to question it. I didn't live her life. I didn't go to the school that she went to. So maybe she was taught flat Earth. Maybe she wasn't. Again, that doesn't really prove that I mean, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't prove a flat Earth or a globe Earth. But Bryant, for some reason, is so triggered, he wants to pretend that that's not even true, that that's what was taught, regardless of what is real or not. Like, again, for the sake of argument, let's go with Bryant. Let's say the heliocentric globe really is the true model of the universe. I actually never disputed that. Why is he so triggered about something that was taught in school, and why is he calling this 102-year-old lady not credible? Maybe she is, maybe she isn't, but she's living now and gave her account of what happened, and he's bringing up some guy and all these translations and mistranslations of what happened. So he only has one guy. If that really was written around the time it was, again, I haven't seen any definitive proof that any of the mistranslated text of history are accurate. Maybe they are. Again, I'm not saying they're not. But same thing with the invisible flying spaghetti monster. If we're going to believe in it, we're going to need more than a couple people who wrote about the flying invisible spaghetti monster. We're going to need more than that. We're going to need more than that. Even if several people corroborated that story, we're going to need more. We're going to need something along the lines of the scientific method.
You get to choose to believe it or not believe it.
When stories don't make sense, like, talking about how they got the distance to the sun by just guessing that Venus was the same size as Earth. That's pretty lucky.
The distance to the sun, you can find the elongation from Venus during its orbit. You can actually look for the elongation where it's at its longest point. And then you can take that when we actually have done radar, bounce it.
No. You're missing what I'm saying. I'm talking about when they first got the distance. How did they figure it out? They figured it out by guessing that Venus was the same size as Earth.
So wait a second. So is Bryant just deficient at English? I mean, this really showcases how little degrees are worth. Because if Bryant is not even on, let's say, a second grade English comprehension level, or you can argue that he's just so triggered, all of his logical capability, let's say maybe he does possess a lot of logical capability, but for whatever reason, the subject of flat Earth completely shut his brain down. So now he's not even on a second grader level. Because he's not even understanding. Jeranism quite simply stated, and Bryant made the claim that he did a lot of research into flat Earth and the flat Earth arguments. So Jeranism is referring to the very first measurement of the sun. He's not referring to anything now. And Bryant, how could he not understand that? I don't think he's playing stupid. I don't think he's of the ilk of Professor Dave, Cy Mandan, all these trolls who just play stupid. I mean, maybe they are. Again, I'm not going to for false dichotomies. Maybe they really are mentally disabled, but they're also possibly trolling. Mentally disabled goofs trolling, and I mean, it's quite hilarious, of course. But Bryant does not seem to be in that category. He seems to be a really nice guy. So is it just a case of he's just that triggered that his even his English comprehension levels dropped so severely below elementary level.
And they got lucky that
Should've
it
went to
was.
the casino.
So,
Okay, but I'm saying, but we've been able to accurately.
oh,
measure
now,
this.
yeah. Again, this is what we're saying is that their stories are just stories. Like, for instance, the same thing happens with how they got the distance to the moon, or how they tried to get the distance to the moon back in the BC era, where they say, oh, they saw a half moon. They knew that there must be a 90-degree angle to the sun, and then they just estimated what the angle from the Earth to the sun would be. Nobody could do that today.
Right. Well, I mean, we've got more accurate ways to measure it now, but
Allegedly.
Yeah, but the story is that they did it back
I
then.
don't disagree that there's been a lot of things through history where they didn't understand what was really going on. I mean, this is why we evolve and we learn things, and we. But
Yeah, not evidence
the
either
thing I
way.
really want to bring up now is
Aristophanes, please.
not the which would
Yeah, let's talk about things that aren't hidden and buried. Like,
So
Okay,
wait a minute.
so-
You wanted to talk about Aristophanes, and then I had something. We have a few things we want to say in that. So do you want to bring that up now, or you want to go somewhere else?
Well, I wanted to talk about Aristophanes a little bit later, but if you
Go
really
ahead.
want to talk about it now, we can talk about it now.
No, just
It's
go
up
with
to you.
whatever
Go
you
ahead.
want to do,
Well,
whatever your order is.
If it's in your
Okay,
order,
bro.
just go with
The
your order.
the only thing I wanted to say is about Eratosthenes really was that if you have 2 data points, I agree, you can get it to work on a flat Earth. I actually am in agreement.
Wow, brownie points for Bryant. Maybe we underestimated him. Is he the first person in a flat Earth debate that has the modicum, just the bare, just a few brain cells required to realize that different variables can lead to the same result? If you switch around the variables, you can have the same result of the experiment, so that particular experiment actually doesn't prove anything, if it even transpired. Is this the first person in a flat Earth debate to actually be at a basic children's level logical understanding?
Okay.
But if you get 3 or more locations, especially like this one study that was done in 37 places around the world, what you end up with, if you map it out mathematically, and this is one of the points I want to get across, is mathematical models can be confirmed. You guys
Yeah,
don't
but
have a
back then,
mathematical
hold on.
model.
But Sagan tells the story of Aristophanes proved it. Everybody talks about Aristophanes proved it. This is why the world knew that the Earth was round. But you just said right now, oh, but it also works with 2 data points on a flat Earth. So you can
No,
admit
but
that.
I know, but okay, but
But they
I'm
didn't
saying
do
it's
3
what-
data points. They didn't do
but
3. They
doesn't-
did 2. Right?
So that story's a lie, right?
The story. I mean, Aristophanes did 2, and that doesn't prove anything.
I mean, well,
And Carl Sagan in Cosmos drilled it into every kid's head.
Wait. 2 does work. All I'm saying is, if you get a local sun at the right distance,
Right.
you can also get it to work on a.
Right. So you're telling me Aristophanes believed, even though he believed that the sun went around the Earth, he thought it was an infinite distance away?
I like to stick more with like the here and now.
Look at the evasion. I mean, why does he not want to address that point? He can address the point and then say, okay. I mean, he kind of did it, but now he's refusing to address the argument of how the variables were determined back then for that experiment. I mean, are we not discussing science? Isn't this a good learning moment to say, okay, this is a well-structured experiment, and this is not. So this wasn't, and that was all basically nonsense. And now this is what a real experiment looks like, and that's how we know the world is a globe. But look at these triggered goofs. He can't even come full circle to admit that that was all doesn't prove anything non-scientific. So if the evidence exists now to prove the Earth is a globe, and he can demonstrate how, that's all well and good, but notice how it's such blasphemy against his religion of scientism. He doesn't even want to blaspheme against the previous priests that came before. So obviously he's claiming the current priests of scientism have way more technology and can accurately measure all these things, which is fine. I'm not disputing that. But he's so thoroughly indoctrinated into the cult of scientism, he doesn't even want to blaspheme. It's so hilarious.
An experiment
Right.
done
Well,
by,
of course.
by 37 people around the world, where they, and here's the thing, when you do the mathematical model of flat Earth Eratosthenes, is you end up with what's a linear curve versus a power curve. So it turns out, and when they did this data, when they mapped 37 different places, it matched perfectly, almost perfectly, what would happen when you modeled this on a globe versus a flat Earth.
You have to assume a distant sun. How you have to assume the sun's 93
Well,
million miles away?
I didn't even want to get into. I mean, that's just more than I wanted to get into. But also,
Well, that's part of the base assumption.
So that's more than he wanted to get into. So he didn't want to get into the actual matter at heart on what is or what isn't a scientific experiment and how exactly it works. He wanted to do some kind of general overview to obfuscate. Is that what he's saying?
I'm saying there is no way you can get 3 or more data points to work on a flat Earth. It just
There's
doesn't
no
work.
way.
No, but there's no way to
There's no way.
triangulate the sun
That's
today
actually-
anyway, right?
No,
It actually does work.
Can you
It actually
triangulate?
does work.
Can you triangulate the sun, Bryant, today?
You can. Well, I'm not. I mean,
Well, the answer is no.
So he just reduced to stuttering now and claiming that you can't do. If the Earth is flat, again, I'm not claiming it is, but if it is, how would you not be able to do that? Because, again, I actually went over this, I believe it was in the short podcast, Fundamental Flaw in Flat Earth Debate. If you haven't checked it out, check that out. It's a very simple concept here. But anybody who's just too hopelessly indoctrinated into their cult, whether it's the globe Earth side or the flat Earth side, if they have a cult mentality, again, I'm not claiming anyone does or doesn't in general, although Bryant here is appearing to, whatever reality is, that's what it is. So claiming something can't work because you're missing information, again, I'm not claiming it can or can't. I'm saying reality is whatever it is. For example, I use the convergence example all the time. Train tracks look like they touch in the distance. So regardless of what shape of the Earth is, they look like they touch, but they don't really touch. So whatever the way the human eye works, the way the visibility index works, the way all the laws of physics work, they work whatever they work. So humans, obviously, what humans know out of the total knowledge of the universe, everything humans know can probably be rounded to 0 or close to 0. So out of all of the undiscovered laws of physics and how all of that works, that could explain things. Again, this isn't an appeal to ignorance. I'm not saying it supports any particular theory. I'm not claiming to know which theory is true. I'm saying whatever theory is true, theory X, let's say, is true. That means everything does work to support theory X, whether we can figure that out or not. And for whatever reason, I guess the narcissists can't understand that humans are fallible. Human knowledge is very limited.
They can't triangulate the sun today, so they also don't have the ability to triangulate. Now, their excuse is it's just too far, so they can't get the
again,
accurate.
you can measure the distance to the sun through knowing how far Venus is away, and then you can get the angle.
How do you know how
Can you
far
tell me?
Venus
Yeah.
is away?
Yeah. Tell me how you get that.
They have done it.
So this is a circular reasoning argument, and then he's stacking on an appeal to authority. They've done it. The priests have talked to God. They've done it. He can't actually provide any empirical evidence, but he just has faith.
They have done it. They bounced radar off of Venus.
Who's
and got a very
they?
Okay, you've seen it?
Have
seen that
radar-
done.
Again,
Wait.
you guys disregard everything.
Do we have
Disregard everything or demand adherence to the scientific method instead of appealing to faith. Science is skepticism, not blind faith acceptance. How does Bryant not know the basics? I really do feel bad for this poor guy.
background radiation coming from the sky anyway? How'd you differentiate between what you sent and what's already coming?
And Brian,
Wow, Witsit, laying the smack down with the basics of controls. I mean, controls are a very simple concept. So whatever currently exists, obviously any addition, that's why you have an independent variable, a dependent variable, and a control. I mean, this is science 101, and for whatever reason, Brian can't grasp this. And all he can do is sputter here. It's kind of weird. I really feel bad for the guy.
you're taking that you've never done it, and you're
Wait,
taking the word of NASA, a government-run agency that that they're lying to us.
You guys don't even know how far your sun is away. I mean,
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
true.
we don't make claims we can't prove. That's the
okay, but
point.
you
We're
got
falsifying that
no
claim.
model. The thing is with science is we have a mathematical model and we find the results fit the
Doesn't
model.
mean it's true.
Science isn't
I mean,
math.
That's a circular reasoning logical fallacy. You can't just reverse engineer everything, but they don't even do it well. If you look at the massive changes in cosmology over the past 500 years, I mean, look at the rate of error has just been so extreme, even within the heliocentric globe model. Now, what's that going to be in another 500 years? Everything Bryant here, all the faith he's preaching, that's all going to be different in 500 years, even within the heliocentric globe model. I mean, if the flat earthers continue doing whatever they do, the flat earth model could be vastly different in another 500 years as well. But again, Witsit here taking the scientific position and not hallucinating or pretend to know things that he doesn't know. That's being scientific. Bryant just takes all of this on faith because he's in a religious cult, even if his conclusion is true. Again, I have to repeat that every 5 minutes because the triggered Dunning-Kruger goofs in the comments, they never stop. They never stop obsessing over the conclusion. The whole point here is logical analysis of argumentation. I mean, do I need to flash a screen every 2 seconds for all the goofs out there because they don't get the point of this whole thing?
What I mean by that is when you look at the distance away, it all matches perfect with the heliocentric model. So it's not that we're just using radar.
It does. They made it match perfectly to teach it to you in kindergarten.
But it doesn't match perfectly, though. They keep changing it. Like every 100, 200 years, all the distances get changed. The sun distances, the planetary. I mean, look at the past couple 100 years. All those distances got changed a bunch of times, quite drastically.
And
actually, they change it all the time.
Teach it to you. Yeah.
Okay,
They change it all the time. They just changed Polaris. They said
and
it's
just
100
one
light
thing-
years
And now
closer.
the moon's in our atmosphere.
Okay, I'm not
right?
going to be able to get through any of this if you guys.
If you guys keep trying to keep it on the track of science and adherence to the scientific method instead of faith, he's not going to be able to get done with his sermon preaching if they keep interrupting him demanding scientific evidence.
But just about the moon, real quick, when they launch a beam at the moon to get a reflection beam, they say they send 1 quadrillion photons and they get 1 back. One photon out of 4 quadrillion.
But
and
again,
come on.
the distances we have, if you understand, Kepler's laws, you can actually see that it all works perfectly on the heliocentric model.
All right.
So this is a reification logical fallacy. Pretending something works perfectly doesn't mean it works perfectly. Again, if you pretend that mass, if you haven't checked out Run Z Cow's thorough debunking of Einstein's relativity, check that out. He used to have videos on YouTube. They've all been removed, but his paper is, you can still find his scientific paper online, Relativity, the Great Mistake, Einstein was wrong, whatever. And he lays it down point by point. The videos were better because he kind of explained it like you were 5 in very easy to understand terms. So anybody who didn't have a mental disability could easily see how relativity is just stacking assumptions. And he systematically, point by point, dismantles the entire theory of relativity and special relativity. So again, you can think that mass attracts mass, but if we're talking about electromagnetic attraction and magnetism, you can call it whatever you want. The math works perfectly. You can make it fit either. Just like you can add 1 unicorn and another unicorn and get 2 unicorns, the math works perfectly. But if that's a cat and not a unicorn, pretending it's a unicorn when it's a cat, that pretending and hallucinating doesn't make the theory true, and then roping in a reification logical fallacies that say all of these hallucinations and pretending work perfectly together, I mean, that's just stacking the fallacies on top of each other. But what's alarming here is that Bryant really does seem completely clueless in terms of just basic logical fallacies and the difference between science and scientism. I think the best way to do any of these debates is to start out with the definitions of science and scientism and just run through 10 basic logical fallacies. Because then Bryant would see how silly he's being, because you outline it at the beginning, you maybe even put up a whole screen with them, that way you could just point at the screen every time the person makes a mistake. Because again, Bryant seems like a very nice guy. He seems like he's arguing in good faith. He genuinely seems ignorant that his religion is actually faith-based and not science-based because he doesn't understand the fundamental differences between science and scientism.
Yes.
We can maybe move on because I don't think we'll ever get through it. Like just reifying the model isn't proof of it. Mathematics, I can show you a Superman equation.
My initial plan was just to kind of go through the slides and have open for discussion because we're never going to get anywhere near through any of this.
Okay,
yeah, I agree. I think we kind of let him present some of his stuff.
Go ahead. We can agree to disagree on that.
Yeah, let's agree to disagree.
But the empirically verifiable definitions of science remain the same, even if Bryant disagrees with them. Faith doesn't magically adhere to the scientific method because they agree to disagree.
So this is something that, I mean, I've yet to hear. I've heard you guys try to explain it, but there are direct flights. You guys realize that, right? There are direct flights by 2 airlines, not just the one which you claim is like government. I've heard some of you say it's like government people and 5 coats of paint on the plane. Didn't you say something
Seven.
about that, David?
Seven.
Okay. But I mean, you really, because you guys do realize that if these direct flights exist, which, you know, Wolfie 6020,
Which they do.
which they do, and you can actually go to and see the Great Circle route, and you can, you know, if you're a pilot, you can load this in and see that it does follow a Great Circle, and you can calculate the time that it takes. Of course, they have all this in their flight plan, and you know, you can download this flight data at flightaware.com. So you can actually look and you can actually see for yourself, like the flight data at flightaware.com.
Yeah, so we
get that from a free account. And so, but if you map this exact route on the flat Earth, it ends up going this absurd distance, because if you go, you know, again, you guys say, well, it stops in Los Angeles, but then if you do that, we can actually see the time it would take to go to Los Angeles and back again. And I mean, you guys agree, right? If I offered to pay a ticket for one of you to come with me from Los Angeles, and we all take our own GPS, right? And we're able to time how long
the global
it takes.
positioning system. We want to
It
know where
uses
we're
a
at on the globe.
radius
Okay,
value.
that's going to help us.
Okay, so but again, you can do visual proof. There's a lot of things you can do. So basically, you're going to deny everything, right?
Demanding adherence to science instead of taking as gospel on blind faith is not denying everything. It's demanding scientific. How does Bryant not understand the fundamentals of science first religion? The fundamentals of science is any positive claim must be proven. You don't just take it on faith. That's the opposite of science. That's religion. How does Bryant not get this?
That's pretty.
No, we
No,
don't
we just
deny
don't
anything. What do you
believe
mean?
reification fallacies. If you're
I know,
begging the
but-
question, it's useless.
But
So-
how can you explain this? You guys can't.
I've explained it.
this.
We've explained it many
We
times.
can.
There
Okay,
is
explain it then.
okay.
How
So
can you
here's
go
one thing
from-
you need to tell me. So on a trip from Sydney to Santiago, if
Right.
you're talking about on the globe, that when you do the mathematics on it and it comes out to say 500 miles per hour, the plane's going. Then
Yeah.
you look at the winds aloft. You look at the jet streams there, and you realize that they go
Right,
150. Hold on, they go 150 to 200 miles per hour. So that means the plane was going 300 miles per hour and taking a 200 mile per hour jet stream to get there in the amount of time. Doesn't it make more sense that the plane would go its maximum speed of 500 to take advantage of the extra speed and actually be going
Well,
750?
they know the times. It's like it's 14 hours one way and 12 hours the other because yeah, there's wind. The world has wind currents where, you know, I've driven back and forth across the coast. I know it's faster one direction than the other. I mean, but not twice the time though. I mean,
Who
we're
said twice the
talking about-
time?
Why would it have to
Well-
be twice the time?
No, it would be twice the time if you map this exact route out, which
All right, so this is, of course, a straw man logical fallacy, and he also roped in a bunch of other logical fallacies. But again, fundamental failure to understand controls and variables. Because you have to calculate all of these things to know. Because if there is the jet stream is however many miles per hour it is, and then what is the total speed back and forth, and how do you plug that into the distances between continents, and how do you verify those distances? Because again, if we're not being religious, if we're being scientific, we need to figure out, again, I'm not claiming anything. I'm not claiming the Earth is a globe or a flat plane. I am not claiming to know the size of any continents or how far they are from each other. I'm not claiming anything because I can't hallucinate to have proof I don't have. Now, if they're claiming proof exists, and maybe it does exist, I am not denying that the proof exists, but you must present the proof if we're being scientific. So far, Brian has not presented the proof, but you would need to know the exact distances between the continents. Then you would need to, of course, know the jet stream speed in each direction and verify the plane, which direction the plane. You would need people on the ground to verify it from many different points. So I don't know. You would think that would have been done. Maybe it has been done. I'm not claiming it has not been done. But the burden of proof is always on positive claims.
again, you can download the flight data and put these coordinates into the flat Earth map. You end up with a route that goes like this. And this,
Okay, so it's
this
well
would be
the GPS uses the globe in contention, bro. It's well documented that planes can go over 800 miles per hour. It's documented mainstream that planes have been clocked going over 800 miles per hour. That little app you're using doesn't actually
That's
get
not
ground
gonna-
speed; it
you
gets
can't-
airspeed, which is relative to the static pressure around the plane. So it's begging the
Well,
question.
the air moves with the Earth. I'm sorry, but we'll get into that later.
Oh, no,
Okay, I
that's
hope
not what
we
he was
do,
saying.
because
That's not what he was saying.
The atmosphere. We'll get to that.
Hey,
So
hey, wait, Brian, let me just interrupt for 1 second here. We're going to let you talk as much as you want. But when we interject, let us just get our quick point across without interrupting, and then you'll go right back to you.
And,
Okay?
and let me just say one real quick. You also say like, oh, you guys are just going to reject everything. But you have to realize from our point of view, everything we're telling you, you're rejecting without even thinking about it. You're not even entertaining our thoughts.
Okay, but how do you explain this?
I just did.
We just did.
I just did, and you
No,
weren't
you
even
didn't.
listening. What do you mean? What's wrong with what I said? So
Again,
the
you
plane
can
that takes,
map
hold on.
You can map this distance on the flat Earth, and you get a ridiculous arc.
Why do we have to
didn't-
fly
you
all the
didn't-
way out?
Yeah,
there?
why would they fly out
Based on
there?
the software you're putting this in, who
No, this
made
is
all
not the
this?
software. You can go.
This is not the flight route that we know happens
You can
with these
you can
tubes.
So we
blast
had Brian, we
I
had
know.
somebody take that
Right.
flight, and they did it live on my channel. They
Right.
live streamed their flight. Go ahead,
Brian, I'm sorry. I'm showing right now. Max. This was Max Egan. He did it, and he clocked. He said his compass. He was expecting to be heading south or west, but he was going northwest, and then west, and then southwest, and then south. And we checked it out on a flat Earth map, and it makes perfect sense. Here's the plane right here. And it's just going northwest, and right there, west for a split second. Then it's going southwest, and south. And his compass readings, his actual physical compass readings, matched the flat Earth map.
But we're
and
way off.
Did not match the globe map.
No, it didn't match what was on the back of the seat in front of him.
Okay, well, send me his information. I'll take a look at it.
It's funny because he claims he did all this research and he knows all of these talking points. And then yet he's like, oh, send it to me. I don't know that. Every single point he's like, oh, well, send me it. I don't know it. So he's clearly just vastly underprepared for this. But again, that doesn't really prove anything either without the independent verification. Because again, the compass could have been malfunctioning, whatever. You would need people on the ground to verify by sight that plane, how the plane is flying over those pieces of land. You would think it would have been done. Like, has anybody done that? Because, I mean, that would be pretty easy, right? You would just coordinate with all these people. I mean, you would get a plane, have it get some kind of weird blinking pattern with like a lot of different lights, very specific lights, so it wouldn't be confused. Like super high-powered lights on the undercarriage of the plane so it could clearly be seen. And then, have people laser track it or whatever so you can clock the speed the aircraft is going. And then also obviously have people inside the plane doing their best to keep track of everything with compasses and also with high-powered cameras so they could zoom into the lands that they're flying over. And then the people stationed at over the land and over the water too. You have people in ships in sight of the land masses and various islands. And then you could easily do this. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's relatively simple. I guess the word simple is better than the word easy. It's simple. It would require a certain amount of manpower, of course, but that would be an easy way to prove it one way or another.
But
All right.
I've seen a lot of contrary flights that have been done and been documented very well.
And just one more thing. 40 seconds. We don't know how fast airplanes are flying. It is very well likely that, to hide this information, on one way they're going 400 miles an hour, and the other way they're going 800 miles an hour to make these times. I always notice a plane is like, oh, we took off an hour late, but we're going to make up that time in the air. They have the ability to make up that time in the air. The last thing is, think about this. On a globe, northern hemisphere on the top, southern hemisphere on the bottom. Go find a flight route between any two northern airports that dips below the equator. You won't be able to find one. They go north to north to north, and they never dip below the equator because that doesn't make any sense on a globe. But
there's cabotage laws, right? I mean, you can't. If you're an airline in the northern hemisphere, you have to go to the southern hemisphere to go back to the northern hemisphere.
No, there's all of the flights. At least I haven't found one yet. It doesn't mean that there aren't. But they all make the line, the pretty much the line you would think. But in the south, deep south, going across the globe, they go all the way up into the north many times and all the way back down.
Well, that's because of cabotage laws, but they also have direct flights. So like I said, this.
No, I'm talking direct flights, but they'll go. Some of them are direct, right? Some of them stop, but they go these ridiculous routes that make no sense. And just in the south, not in the north.
Okay.
Let me say one thing, Brian. Let me just show you one thing. So the other thing that's weird to me is there's always these cases where I'm like, well, if they have this, it would be hard for us to explain. One of those was undersea cables running from Australia or New Zealand to South America, because when you go look at the map of all of our undersea cables, there's no cables that run across there. So then I said, that's peculiar. Why wouldn't they have cables running there? Then I went and looked at, well, let me look for cruise ships. There's no cruise ship that goes from New Zealand or Sydney to South America. Why? Because it's way bigger of an area than than we've been told. So if a cruise ship went out there, they're going to get, you can't make a cruise ship get a jet stream like a plane. A plane can grab an extra 200 miles per hour. A cruise ship can't.
I have to research it.
So, that's such a coward way out, because if he's truly having a scientific debate, say, okay, for the sake of argument, let's say what you say is true. How could that be countered? All he can say, oh, I have to look at it. Oh, send it to me. So he's just offered nothing this entire discussion so far.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, so don't just dismiss it, but think about it and
That's
research.
a great answer. No, that's a great answer.
Let's move on.
Good answer.
Great answer. Yeah. You have to research it. Great.
I did create this little. I mean, again, to me, it's an impossible flight. I've looked at it many times. I don't buy your explanations. There's just no way on the flat Earth you can follow the actual coordinates that are in a flight log.
Appeal to incredulity. Not only was there a way, but this one guy claimed to have done it. Now, since the flat Earth map, they can make up any map that would match whatever the plane flew, right? Doesn't mean the flat Earth map is accurate in any way, but it clearly can be made to match the flight. I mean, how is Bryant not comprehending this? You can make anything match anything if you're just imagining random parameters. Obviously, those would have to be proven, but you can imagine a whole bunch of different things to match flights. I mean, it's so weird. It's like Bryant has completely abandoned the scientific method.
And when you actually enter them, this is not made up. This is actually entering, when you actually enter the coordinates on, not here, but it comes out something like this.
Yeah, but a plane just is put in.
You just
put in the GPS route.
You just put in the route and it just goes. The plane just flies itself.
So
it's like dead reckoning,
wanna
right?
look
now, if you said the planes are going supersonic speeds, then that could possibly make up the difference.
They literally do. Admittedly, mainstream, they go over 800 miles per hour in the north.
That's what we're saying is the way that they can.
That's it.
The jet streams down there in the south.
But again, you got to show me proof that they're going that fast.
The jet streams.
It's public information. Okay.
Yeah, the jet streams go 250.
Then you'd be, it's a sonic, there's a thing called a sonic boom that, you have.
But they can
You
do it
won't
over
hear
the
it on the
ocean.
airplane.
You won't do it on the
doesn't
ocean.
happen in jet streams because of
I'm not
static
saying
pressure
that.
around the
People above
plane.
will hear it though. People above will hear it though.
That
Above
doesn't
what?
happen.
Not out in the middle of the ocean. If someone's out in the middle of the ocean, a plane
I know,
goes,
but
they're not going to hear anything.
If they
Called
got
static pressure.
Wow, Brian is so triggered, he's just grasping at any and all straws to try to defend the faith.
If they got to do these speeds, then there's going to be places where they're going to be going over land.
Above water. No, you could get out. You could get out over the water. You would get out over the water and then take off fast.
All right.
Okay, let's just move on.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Too triggering. Gotta move on.
We're not going to make any headway here. So one little thing I just wanted to, again, I hope we can move on because I don't think that we're going to come to any type of consensus on that.
Not when he just keeps avoiding the burden of proof or the basics of logic.
But
No.
send me some stuff. I'll take a look at.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
We like it.
No, I look at stuff.
But you have to have an open mind. If you look at stuff with the already preconceived.
I do have.
Well, we're saying things and you're not even listening. We just gave you an explanation.
He has an open mind. He was literally just grasping at straws to justify why a plane couldn't be going at a certain speed without even knowing. He didn't measure it. Again, that doesn't mean it is, but without the measurement, he already started rolling in the excuses to defend the faith.
For how a plane can do it in the south, and you're just like, no, I don't think that it's impossible. I think it's impossible. We're like,
I spent a lot. I don't know how that. I mean, the faster speeds is the only way it's possible. Then
that's what we said.
This is so weird. They're claiming that it's the higher speed, and he's saying, yeah, that's the only way it's possible. They're not claiming that it's being done 10 different ways. They're claiming it's being done one way, and Bryant is saying, yeah, that's the only way it's possible. That's why it can't be done, because people would hear it. I mean, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is weird.
Everyone knows that happens in real life, though.
It's openly admitted.
Supersonic. I mean, like 1,400
no,
miles.
it's not supersonic.
You
if
don't
the
need
wind,
1,400.
and if the
800 to 900 would do it.
And he's just constantly strawmanning and pretending they're making statements they're not making. They clearly cited the miles per hour. Now he's doubled it out of nowhere because they claimed 800. Now he's like, oh, they're going 1,400. Nobody said 1,400. I mean, this is really weird. Is just Bryant that triggered that his brain just ceases to function?
900 would do it.
900 would do it.
Well, not when you do that distance. You do
850.
You're drawing a big U. You're drawing that line. So nobody who flies in that route ever sees Antarctica. You would see Antarctica from that route. Nobody's ever
That
seen
makes no
Antarctica from
sense.
that.
Actually,
south.
they do. Actually, again, if you
No, they
go to-
do not. Go look
No,
at
you
the
can see
look at
the
the
ice.
globe. Wait. Go back to where you
No.
had the data points and tell me how somebody sees Antarctica from those
no,
data points.
Not on that. In this,
Oh,
you
now
don't
you're
see-
changing
you
it?
see- You see the
Oh.
when you look at these two.
Hold on, that
studies,
picture on the right. Nobody's ever taken that flight route. What is that?
This is not drawn as it should be drawn. This is not the Great Circle.
So now he's saying the evidence that he presented is not drawn properly. So he's basically debunking his own evidence now, saying that, oh, it can't actually be used to prove that.
Correct drawing.
So what are you
Okay.
showing
If
us?
you
for?
look at his
And
story,
yeah.
though, he fly.
Great circle routes on the
No,
meridian are
actually,
impossible anyway.
this
on
might
the
be.
globe.
It's just the perspective of the.
No, that's not.
So-
is that
What
What's
it's
that white thing on the bottom? What is that there? No, like the white circle. What am I looking at? The top picture.
Well, let's just move on. This
Is that supposed to be Antarctica? Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like a cartoon. All right.
It's not a cartoon.
Duh.
I
They
mean,
should have a real photo. by
I know,
now.
but
You would think so, bro.
You know, Dave, your app has Antarctica on it. You do realize that, right?
around the outskirts?
How so?
I have your app, and I went to Antarctica to look for someone, but it kept loading and loading. Somebody told me that they found some people in Antarctica that downloaded
Oh,
your app.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, NASA.
We have two guys in Antarctica.
Okay.
One of them at KC Station, and the other one was out in the middle of nowhere. Here he is, right here.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah,
So right.
and I was communicating with him for a while, and it was quite interesting.
Okay.
Mm.
So I mean, again, these. So what I want to just go over some high altitude stuff is one of the things I've noticed that flat earthers or flat Earth believers don't seem to understand. Oh, I don't have my drop with you.
Oops, sorry guys, I didn't know that.
Well, denier,
sorry,
whatever you want
screen
to
was
be
on
called, is the
Wait,
sheer
what?
scale of the Earth. Okay, so
Sorry.
Nobody's denying the sheer scale of the Earth. Aren't the flat Earth claiming? Aren't the flat Earthers usually claiming it's even bigger than presented? I mean, this level of strawmanning, it's just so silly. And again, I don't think Bryant is doing this on purpose as a troll. It looks like just a fundamental lack of brain power here, due to being triggered or whatever. Maybe he just has some kind of weird autism where he's kind of smart in certain areas and just fundamental failure here in this particular area. I don't know.
I don't know if can you see me right now, or am I?
We got it. Sorry, guys. Good.
Am I sure?
Yeah, we can see.
You
we
are now.
can
I
see
had
you.
the wrong screen up, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, the amount of water on planet Earth, and I did the math. There's 1/1000th amount of water as there's volume of land. Okay,
Mhm.
and so that's literally 2 drops on a bowling ball. I'm not a bowling ball, a billiard ball. So if you take 2 drops of water and just smear it around, okay, that's not much water. Okay, the Earth is huge. It's not like this over here. I don't know if you can see my screen, where you'd have all this water fill in a smaller Earth, and it looks like it's a lot of water. So the spinning,
So,
But it's a
wait
lot
a
of
minute,
water.
wait-
It
wait
is
a
a lot
minute.
of water. Period.
It's a lot of water. If you think about it, your agreement that 70% of the Earth's surface is
surface.
ocean.
I'm
Okay,
talking about
okay,
volume.
all right, and let's say the average depth of that ocean is only 300 feet. Okay, so if it's 70%, let's just say we take half of that 300 feet and put it on the land. All right, that's 250 feet of water covering the entire globe. That's a significant amount of water.
know.
And it
but
goes
I-
down
I-
to 7
I-
miles.
No, what you're missing my point here. The volume of the Earth compared to the water is there's only 1/1000th the volume of water. Because when you take, just do the math. You can do the math and see.
All right,
You're talking about
so
the whole
the
Earth
point?
construction, the
Relevance.
whole
Yeah.
Earth
Well, the
construction.
relevance is because when you get into these Earth from space pictures, in images like this, when you guys talk about the atmosphere is incredibly thin. It's
Yeah, we know
actually
that.
only this is
We know.
this is to
That's a
scale.
cartoon.
This is not a cartoon. Okay, this
What?
is if you
Wait,
draw.
That is
What
a
are we
cartoon.
watching- What are we looking
What?
at?
What
Right
are
That
we
is a
looking at?
cartoon. That is a cartoon.
This isn't meant to be an actual. This
Oh.
is meant to show you that the.
Why
atmosphere-
not? Then let's get some real ones. You have any?
Okay. But fair enough. Go ahead with the visualization.
Wait, what? So he's saying it's not a cartoon, but it's not meant to be real either? What? Now, Bryant does have an interesting point here regarding the volume of claimed water on the claimed Earth. So obviously he doesn't understand the burden of proof logical fallacy. But within the information presented by the so-called establishment, again, you just look this up on Google. It says 332.5 million cubic miles in terms of water volume on Earth. Well, I mean, it is a lot, but relative to the claimed size of the Earth, it's not in terms of percentage. So 71% of the Earth is covered in water, but what is that in terms of volume? Now, again, without proving the radius of the Earth, none of this means anything, but it is interesting that Bryant did bring up that if we are going by the globe Earth model, the model itself doesn't claim that just because the surface is covered that the volume is great amount. According to the model here, it would be 332.5 million cubic miles. Now, again, what does that really mean? I don't know. Let's see what kind of claims are made.
Let me just go through the slides and then we can have discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So this yellow line here is the Kármán line. This means that over 99% of the atmosphere is below this line.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much when you have images like this that show the atmosphere looking so big, and then, how could the atmosphere be going this fast up here? And so, well, it's not that big. It's actually only relative to the size of the Earth. It's only this little bit. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you got these, these pictures at high altitude, you're not going to see much curvature. I mean, the curvature is there, but if the Earth is huge, right?
You're not going to see any curvature.
So I agree. The Red Bull skydive, that was a fisheye lens. It's clearly way too much curvature. So
Right.
it goes both ways. And then,
You agree if the Earth was flat, you wouldn't see any curvature either?
Well, no. What you guys do is you cherry pick images from, and I actually have looked at the actual originals of all of these, and you can actually see. If I can just load this here.
Cherry pick? Is he just psychologically projecting? Because the people that believe the Earth is a globe cherry pick the images they send. The flat earthers, again, there's different types of flat earthers. That's not only a false claim by. See, technically that would be a hasty generalization, logical fallacy by Bryant, because he's grouping in all the flat earthers into one category. There's a whole bunch of different types of flat earthers, just like there's a whole bunch of different types of globe earthers. A certain percentage of flat earthers that bring up certain images at certain altitudes showing zero curvature, that's a certain percentage that they're claiming debunks the Earth. They're not using that as a claim for flat Earth. They're using that as a claim for lack of curvature on a globe Earth of the purported size that scientism preaches. Theoretically, the Earth could be a much greater globe and you still wouldn't see the curvature. So there's a lot of possibilities here, and of course Brian's just grouping this all in with a hasty generalization logical fallacy.
That's a simple question though, Brian. If the Earth was a flat level plane, there would be no curvature, correct?
But I know, but you guys don't have any actual good images to show no curvature, except these ones that are cherry picked.
You see how triggered he is. He can't even answer the question. The correct answer is yes, correct. If the Earth were flat, there would be no curvature. I mean, he's not telling Bryant to agree with it in any way. This is just a basic question that children can answer, and yet Bryant can't. He's just so triggered. I feel bad for the guy.
All the hot air balloon ones without a fisheye lens show no curvature.
And also,
it's actually the opposite. I'm sorry. It's actually the opposite. The ones that are done very carefully, when you center the frame on the horizon, you guys realize that,
that
right?
happens a lot from a balloon. They center the frame.
Let him finish.
You
Finish.
center the frame on the horizon, and you always see a curvature. And the cool thing about Walter Bisland's calculator is that you can use a mathematical model.
Always appeal to extremes? You don't always see it. What did he do here? He cherry-picked these 16 examples. What he psychologically projected the flat earthers did, he did that himself to show that, which nobody's disputing that, again, based on lenses used. This is why none of this really proves anything. Because the way that lenses, photography, and film work, anything can look different than what it actually is. So none of this really proves anything. I mean, you'd have to go so much farther, higher. I mean, I don't even know why this is being argued. It's kind of embarrassing.
That validates what the actual curvature is. So we know how big the Earth is, and we can model how it should look from a certain altitude. And what we see is what we get.
Again, with these reification and appeal to authority and appeal to popularity logical fallacies, where he's pretending he's again, I guess scientism cultists can be grouped under that but people who are actually practicing real science, regardless of which side on the flat or globe Earth debate they would never make this argument.
When we properly center the camera frame on the horizon, so you guys do realize fisheye lens is not.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
In the middle of the actual photo, or the middle of a fisheye lens, it's straight is straight and curve is curve, and right down the middle, same thing. But above and below, that's where it gets distorted.
Have
Right.
you seen any of these without a fisheye lens? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, the fisheye, yeah, without the Mage project,
Without.
yeah, there are.
Okay, there's
But
no
let's,
curve.
Let's say this too.
Right.
That
Oh,
you do know
that's
that
not
every
true.
you do know that every
100%
single
true.
camera and every single eyeball is spherical and has problems with that, right? You're never going to get a flat image. Period.
I've heard Bob say that. That's when I threw my hands up and just quit debunking flat Earth. When they said, "Oh, if we go out to space and there's in the window and it's my eyeball's always going to see a curve," it's like, okay,
No.
how can you debunk
Well,
that?
No,
No, no,
he's
he said
saying
that.
that you see in a circle, so you would see that, and then also it's called Rayleigh scattering. You get circumference of light, a radius of light over a flat surface. You would potentially see that, and in addition, Neil deGrasse Tyson tells the whole world that you wouldn't see curvature
Oh,
from
Neil
60
deGrasse Tyson-
miles up.
No, hold on. Neil deGrasse Tyson was wrong.
63 miles.
Okay, so a lot to digest there. So again, Witsit with the basic common sense of controls. How does the human eye see? So whether the Earth was flat or a globe, would train tracks still look like they touch in the distance? Would convergence still be there? Obviously, these are known as controls. Now, it's really not that difficult. That's why I would say 99% of what is being discussed doesn't prove anything one way or another. But who are the clueless goofs who can even realize that fact? I mean, what is going on here? Now, at least Bryant, again, we have to give this guy credit. I have to give this guy credit. He's actually doing an absolutely horrible job, but better than I believe any other heliocentric globe earther has done before. I've proposed the conspiracy theory that flat Earth is a psyop, and if the Earth really is a heliocentric globe, there's some kind of, this is kind of like a joke where the intelligent heliocentric globe believers, they intentionally never argue or debate flat Earth in public because they think it's too funny to watch the clueless goofs defend the globe Earth so poorly as to increase flat Earth membership, which to them is funny if the Earth really is a globe. Again, that's just one of the theories. I'm not claiming that theory is true, but that would be really hilarious because, I mean, there's definitely really smart people out there. They're just choosing not really smart heliocentric people on the heliocentric globe side. They're just choosing not to ever debate publicly in any way. Now, if Bryant's the best they have out of the publicly debating ones, I mean, the bar is so low. I mean, I have to give him credit, but the bar is set so extremely low. It's set lower than children's level basics. But at least Bryant is here claiming that one of the scientism priests, Neil deGrasse Tyson, is wrong. Let's see what he says here. Because I don't know if any other debate, most of the scientism cultists, the scientism worshippers of the Church of NASA, etc., they view Neil deGrasse Tyson as one of the prophets of scientism, one of the saints of scientism who can do no wrong.
All right.
I don't know why you
Okay,
guys think
well,
Neil deGrasse
Dave-
Tyson is somehow the
So,
mouthpiece for all of
Because he's your
science.
Oh, that's what-
spokesperson.
that's
All
what
right,
science
guys,
is.
guys, hold on.
Yeah.
So Brian, do you realize that on a flat Earth you wouldn't see curvature? We can agree on that. And on a globe Earth, if you think you see curvature like you're showing us in those pictures, you have to
Yeah.
follow that curve around, and by the time you turned around, you'd be pointing at the ground. But that's not on a globe how you would see, because it would remain at the same level. So we see in a straight, we see in a in the same distance in all directions.
Radius.
So whether it's 10 miles or 100 miles, we're seeing that same distance at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, all the way around. So we see in a circle, right? So here's my guy standing here, and this is where he sees. This is the limit of his vision where the sky meets the land, and he's seeing in a circle. And if you carefully look at that, draw a line across it, here's the curvature that you're seeing. It's just the limit of your vision. You're drawing
Wait,
a line.
hold on. I want to know why he shakes his head at that and says no. So what about what Dave just said you don't agree with? You don't think we see in a circle?
No,
This is what
You can't
you're
just
seeing.
say no when he,
On a flat. Just think of this: if the Earth was flat, and we see, where the sky meets the land, that's the limit of your vision. Well, if it's 10 miles or 20 miles or 50 miles, whatever it is, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I'm seeing that, but you draw a straight line. You're drawing a straight line, and the point right in front of me is the 50 miles away. And as it goes out, it's getting farther and farther and farther away beyond where I can see. So you're drawing an imaginary line like this, and this is your curvature of a flat Earth. And by the way, this doesn't prove the Earth is flat. This is what you would see on a flat Earth, but that's also what you would see on a globe Earth.
But that's a fact.
What law of perspective is that, though? I mean, what?
What do you mean law of perspective? Are you telling me you can see further?
You're telling me that if that's a flat Earth, you're gonna see curve on a flat Earth like that?
This is
Yes.
you can. So let's say there's a cumulus cloud day, and all those clouds are sitting there, 5,000 feet above your head, and then 20, 30 miles in the distance, those clouds are touching the ground. Well, that's the limit of your vision, okay? Because you can't see. It's the convergence point. So that's the limit of your vision. So whether that's, so it's 30 miles that way, it's 30 miles that way, it's 30 miles that way. And if you connected all those dots, you're drawing a big circle.
I'll tell you I know you're getting this. It's the 0.02 degrees of angular.
No, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. Bryant seems okay. We've given him far too much credit. I mean, this guy might actually have a mental disability. He's not grasping this. I don't know what to make of this. I don't care how many degrees this guy has from indoctrination facilities. A child can understand the concept that David Weiss just outlined. He's even got the diagram, but even without the diagram, is it really that difficult to understand that? Let's make this really simple. Let's say you're almost blind. You can only see 1 foot in each direction. So if you look around you, 1 foot in each direction, would that be a circle, a square, a rhombus? Would that be a perfect circle from where you are standing? So let's say somebody can see 100 feet. Everybody's vision's a little different. Somebody can see a little bit better than somebody else. Whatever it is, whether it's 1 foot or 10 feet, 100 feet, if you do that in every direction, will that make a circle from where you are standing? If you're standing in the middle, would that be a circle? Bryant can't understand this? Really? I really don't think he's playing stupid like some of these other goofs who enter these debates. Look at his face. He seems genuinely confused. And if he does have a mental disability, I mean, why didn't somebody stop him from coming on on this podcast and just humiliating himself? I mean, it's crazy.
But that's the vanishing point, Dave. The vanishing point comes from the 2.02.
Okay, so
you realize that, right?
No. I'm not talking about. I'm talking. That's you trying to squeeze in between the sky and the ground. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in these images, the farthest you can see the land is the farthest you can see the land, and it's in the same distance in all directions. That is a circle. You're looking at that because of your programming and saying, "Oh, that's the curve of the globe."
Sphere.
It's not the curve of the.
No, but you guys do know what Rayleigh scattering is, right?
Yeah, I just brought it up.
The Rayleigh limit. I mean, the Rayleigh criteria. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I literally
brought
just
it,
brought
Austin's
it up.
one that brought it up.
So
Yeah.
the Rayleigh criteria says that even though our angular resolution can only make out a certain level at 0.02 degrees, light is still hitting photons are still hitting our eyes. So we are still receiving light beyond that. There is the vanishing point of perspective is not a point. It doesn't end there. It's just, that's the limit of our vision. We can get a telescope and extend that further, but we're still getting light beyond that. Yes, we are. This is the Rayleigh criteria.
So okay, but
Yeah, no,
the
you would have
atmosphere
a
should block
circumference
light
of
from
light with a
further.
local light source, and then you would literally actually be able to see a curvature, or like imposed with the convexity of your eyes, you would see a slight convexity. And you can replicate this in Blender or whatever you want to do. It's just like objective, and
Yeah.
so.
And if the Earth was flat, Brian, and you were looking across the Atlantic Ocean, let's say from the east coast of the United States to Spain, you do recognize that it doesn't matter what telescope you have, you're not going to be able to see through the atmosphere.
Well, again, but you can see if you're on and then that's another.
Well, you didn't answer my question. Would you agree that you would never see across the Atlantic Ocean, whether it's a sphere Earth or a globe Earth?
I would say that on certain conditions that are very clear, you should be able to.
Wow, we can't see 500 miles, and you think we could see 2,500?
All right, so this is a fundamental failure by most people who argue. Have these goofs never seen a weather report or a visibility index? Like, does he not understand how precipitation affects visibility? I mean, even a small child understands that in extremely foggy conditions, you might not even be able to see down the street in a really dense fog. Now, there's never 0% precipitation, at least that has been observed thus far. I mean, if somebody knows about it, that's fine. But there's always going to be some kind of moisture, some kind of elements in the air that are going to prevent you from seeing 100% perfect with perfect clarity across great distances. This is not rocket science. This is just absolute children's level basics, and Bryant is so triggered he doesn't even want to give a straight answer if he's capable of giving that straight answer. Again, I don't know if he's some kind of like idiot savant where he's like a super genius at certain topics that are not being discussed here, and that's how he's advanced in academia, quackademia, whatever. And for this particular topic, his mental disabilities are more clear. I don't know.
I'm not saying we can see 2,500 miles. I'm
Well, that's
saying
how
that
far
if-
it is across
if
the Atlantic Ocean.
If the condition, I don't know. I mean, the condition.
Continuation of light,
The
bro.
atmosphere-
Come on, man.
Wait, he doesn't know the distance by his own cult? What?
Light keeps going. You do realize that.
Not
distance-
through an
I
atmosphere.
got the-
No,
My goodness. It's called
Okay.
continuation of light.
just like
You guys-
sound, man. Sound travel.
Light spreads out. Light
travel.
has to fill. Light is
Right.
going out in a. Just say its radius becomes a sphere. It's,
I know
it's going in
what-
all
I know-
directions. It's getting thinner and thinner and thinner to the
No,
point where you can't see it.
Dave, I've done the calculations with the star. Let me just go to that point now since you're bringing it up.
Completely avoiding the previous point about looking across the Atlantic Ocean.
Because I actually did an experiment where that I proved that I could see further than my angular resolution. And I did it right here. And I bought this little bulb here, and I measured the radius of it, and I figured out exactly what the limit of how far I could see it, which would be about 30 meters away is where my angular vision disappears, right?
Yeah, you
But
can
when
see
I-
light further away. Yeah.
You can see light a lot further away. And I've heard Dave talk about this, and it's
But did anybody even claim that? What is he doing here? What is he claiming? Is anybody disputing that angular resolution is not I mean, what is he even doing here? Normal eye limit. Obviously, that depends on the lights, depends on the objects, depends on the viewing conditions, the atmosphere, etc., the precipitation. I mean, there's a million different things that this depends on. Like, what is he doing here?
provenly. I mean, I did the whole calculations with Alpha Centauri, and there's actually right here. It's very easy to explain why we can see Alpha Centauri.
No, it's not. You have to. How do you know the
No.
mass and the brightness? How do you know the mass of that star?
Because guys have figured it out.
Alpha Centauri. Again, this gets into like many decades of astrophysics and astrology, where
So this is just another appeal to authority logical fallacy. So he's just stacking fallacies and then creating this experiment on top of fallacies and expecting everybody to take it on blind faith. Does that sound scientific to anyone, or is that just religious?
they've mapped out. But again, if you can make the easy assumption that, and this is based on good science, not an assumption, but even if you don't believe, I'm talking to you guys, you don't believe mainstream science, that Alpha Centauri is about the same size as the sun.
How do you know
So
that?
how do they know that?
Again, it's the equations they use.
How far is Alpha Centauri?
Equations are not
Alpha
are not
Centauri is
reality.
1 + 1 unicorns equals 2 unicorns. That must mean unicorns are real just because the math works. The math works.
And again, Dave, just look, I did the calculations here, and we know that the sun, because by your argument, even if it wasn't Alpha Centauri, if we put the sun where Alpha Centauri is, you would say that we couldn't see it.
So
And
let's
you
just
would say we could.
can we just
And
walk
again,
it?
the calculations are right here.
Hold on to the calculation.
Again, fundamental failure to understand how burden of proof works. The burden of proof is on the positive claim. Who here is making a positive claim? Now, maybe the flat earthers are. I haven't heard their positive claims. I haven't heard any of the flat earthers here claim a distance of the sun. They're asking the question. They're being scientifically skeptical and scientifically minded. They're asking how Bryant figured out the distances, the sizes, and whether or not they're the same. And he's just sputtering into all of these logical fallacies in a Trigger Dunning-Kruger type fashion. I mean, this is not science, Bryant. I don't understand how Bryant doesn't understand the basics. Children's level science and logic 101. You're not going to just assume and have blind faith in those that came before. If all the priests figured out that God is real, I mean, that must mean God is real, right? I mean, it's been decades of good priest work, according to him. He calls it good science, whatever. Good talking to God, high level Bible research. That must mean it's true because it was done for X period of time. Like, what is Bryant talking about here?
Just one question, then you can keep going. Do you believe in the inverse square law of light?
I've actually done videos on the inverse square law.
Yes or no? Is it a real
yeah,
thing?
but I'm showing you that this thing takes into account the inverse square law, and what the conclusion is we actually have. You can do the calculation.
So here he never answers the question. I mean, obviously that's a yes because he said it was factored in. But how hard is it to say yes or no? Usually only trigger goofs can't say yes or no. So he keeps going, you can do the calculation. Well, you can do the calculations for adding up unicorns. That doesn't mean unicorns are real. That doesn't mean the unicorn wasn't mistaken for something else. That doesn't mean there aren't other variables. You can't just expect everyone to believe in unicorns just because the math works.
The amount of photons that hit your eyes.
No photons hit anybody's eyes.
Stop with the photons hitting the eyes, man. You're
listen,
tripping me out.
How do my eyes protect myself from that kind of speed?
I feel like you're threatening me
Crazy.
physically or something when you say that.
It's the amount of light. Okay, you don't use the word photons. It's the amount of light. There is light hitting our eyes. Provably, if you say the sun is where Alpha Centauri is, you can do the calculations and show that light is hitting your eyes from that location.
To do the calculations, you need the mass.
No, you just agreed that we could assume, just for argument's sake, that we could put the sun where Alpha Centauri is.
Nobody agreed to that. Wait, hold on a second. What is Bryant smoking? He keeps saying, oh, they just agreed. Nobody agreed to anything because he didn't demonstrate that with irrefutable proof, which is what anybody scientifically minded would need.
Based on Dave's rationality, we would not be able to see it.
We would not be able to see it.
Well, no, we would. Right. You actually can prove.
But hold on.
So wait a minute. Wait. I just want to ask a quick question.
The actual amount. You know what, Brighton? You guys
if we went halfway to the sun, would the sun be 4 times as bright as it is?
Dave, I've heard this argument. That's what I'm trying to.
I'm asking a question. Do you believe? Am I wrong or
disprove
am I right?
him? Yeah, disprove him.
I've heard all that, so I'm trying to explain the answer to that.
He's asking, would it be 4 times as bright?
Would it be 4 times as bright as the inverse square law dictates?
This is why I didn't want to go 4 against.
Because he can't answer a yes or no question. I mean, this is why he didn't want to go on. It's a yes or no question. I mean, or you could say approximately. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. You could say approximately yes, or not even close. No, yeah. I mean, he can't even see that. This is really weird because, like, if he understands the concepts well, how can he not answer a simple question? Or let's say there's a missing variable you need to answer that. He can say, that's not easy to determine because of X variable, which is this, instead of just having this meltdown.
No. I'm just asking you one question. That's it.
We can be quiet. We can be quiet. Let Dave do it.
I've actually taught the inverse square law. I understand, like your balloon analogy, how the balloon thins out. Okay, that's not incorrect, but you've got to realize that if you're using light.
How dumb does it sound when somebody asks a priest for proof of God? The priest says, well, actually, I've actually taught at seminary school. I've actually taught this. How does that prove it's true? It's so silly and religious. And the fact that Bryant doesn't understand how silly and religious his answers are. I've heard this argument. I've actually taught this. You can do the calculations. I mean, while completely avoiding actual meaningful dialogue or being able to prove any of his points. I mean, this is why there are so many flat earthers. Again, real or not, there's so many flat earthers out there because none of these people who are publicly debating can give any straight answers. It's real weird.
It would have to be a ridiculously thick balloon because the amount of energy coming out of, well, again, we could say the sun or Alpha Centauri is, and again, this is based on many decades of astrophysicists doing
Many decades of priests talking to God and teaching in seminary school.
lots of careful research to map out the stars. And again, when you study this and get appreciation for the predictive power, but if you don't study science, you don't really appreciate how all these things can be predicted, how everything.
If you don't study religion, you can't really study how all these prophets made accurate predictions.
How everything falls into place. But if you can just take this amount of actual luminosity, which is the brightness of Alpha Centauri, and take that inverse square, yes, it does drop off by an inverse square, but there's still.
What does luminosity as constant mean?
Luminosity. Yeah, luminosity is constant. Brightness diminishes by inverse square law. But the luminosity, the power output, is this. Here's the power output. Is like, let's say 6 times 10 to 26 watts. So that's a lot of light. That's a real thick.
Luminosity is constant. What do you mean by that?
The luminosity is the brightness. So that's the amount of power that's getting radiated out. Okay. The brightness is the inverse square. This is what's called a radiance. So a radiance is measured in watts per meter squared. So that's what spreads out by inverse square. Okay.
Okay.
So when you get to the Earth from that distance of Alpha Centauri, you still have measurably 2.7 times 10 to the minus 8 watts per meter squared.
What distance is that, and how is that proven?
And we know the minimum detectable amount of light for our human eye is actually, we can detect that perfectly fine because we can detect as little as 10 to the minus 10 watts per meter.
So you did the math on the closest star, the very closest star that
I
there
know,
is,
but
right?
the closest star, but there's more than enough. But you do realize there's only 5,000 to 6,000 visible stars. So it's not like we're seeing like the whole galaxy. We're only seeing our local vicinity.
You don't know the distance to the stars. They just changed Polaris distance by 100 light years and admitted they were off by 100 light years, over 30%.
I've got the data from Polaris, but we can.
But wait,
yeah,
you
the
see what I'm
data that
saying?
they changed already.
They
Okay,
changed it by-
which version do you have, Brian?
Brian,
I've got.
can I?
I do want to ask him though,
saying
Dave.
that
Let me do this one because I just want to ask him.
You guys think that Polaris is staying in place, but it's provably moving.
But wait, that's
moves
called,
in a little
that's
circle.
called a
Hold on.
diversion, right? Because
already said that.
you're bringing up something that requires the distance to the stars to make your whole argument. So I'm like, but you don't actually know those distances. For example, Polaris.
This is where science comes in.
For example, Polaris was just, they
Faith.
come out and admit that they were off by over 30%, and it's 100 light years closer at least. So you admit that we don't actually know for sure that these distances and masses are correct.
But I'm saying the actual movement of Polaris we map very carefully.
Okay.
Okay.
You're changing it now to a
Well, I was-
Moving the goalpost and also completely avoiding the argument. I mean, you could rope in a bunch of logical fallacies there, red herring, etc. He's saying something that appears to be directly related. I mean, it's sort of kind of related, but we're talking the movement, whatever. The movement is very easy to see the movement, right? The stars are rotating around the Earth, whether it's a globe, whether it's flat, whether it's geocentric, whether it's heliocentric. You can set up a time lapse. You can see the movement of the stars. So regardless of the shape of the Earth or the movement of the stars are easy to track, relatively, compared to knowing the distance. So he completely avoided, he's this triggered and or clueless that he completely avoided that Polaris, and again, they did this with the sun too. The distance to the sun has been changed so many times because not only are humans fallible, but human technology is fallible. But these scientism cultists have such blind faith in the infallibility of fallible humans and fallible human technology, they can't even see how clueless they seem. They're not even on a children's level of logical understanding here.
Well, I was trying to
conversation.
explain before that light, the reason that we can see light, there's a good explanation why we can see light so far away, and it doesn't drop off.
Look how he just completely, again, avoided addressing this fundamental failure. So if they're off by 30%, 30% is a large error. 30% is a large error, especially when you're making these finely tuned calculations to tenths of degrees and all of this like he did. That's, again, why the math could work, but it might not be representing true reality. And again, there's just fundamental failure to understand the basics by Bryant.
Brian, can I
but
can I ask a question?
can we just
when
walk
you're-
him through the distance thing? Because I want to know where he thinks that we're wrong.
See, I can't debate four people.
No, it's not
guys.
debate. I'm asking you a
we're not.
question.
We're
It's a
asking a
conversation.
question together. We're having.
If he's gonna melt down every time they ask a question he can't answer, they're not jumping on him with four guys talking. Three guys, I think three. Was it Witsit and Jeranism? Possibly Hibbler? I don't know. They just they keep asking the same question because he's not answering it. It's four guys asking the same question.
We're having a
Nobody's
simple
debating.
conversation.
I just get into one thing and he's like, well,
No,
what
we're
about
still
this? What
talking about
this?
the sun and whether we would be able to see it far away. But
Yes,
Dave,
you would be able to see it far
Okay,
away,
that-
provably.
but hold on.
So we
Dave
have
always
questions.
talks about always talks about the sun if it were right above our heads and still 867.
I've seen him do that.
Okay,
yeah.
it would
Yeah.
take up the whole sky, right? So then we move it 93 million miles away, and now it's the size of a dime, right? So if we
Yep.
did it again, doubled that distance, then it would be smaller than that dime, right? Let's say
Okay,
half
that's
as big.
Going by angular resolution, though. I already
Okay.
know where this goes. And when you get down to the 0.02 angular resolution where we couldn't make out details, but remember, our eyes are photon receptors. It's not about, and this is why I did this. This is why I did this little experiment, because I could show that even though my eyes could only see it 30 meters away, I was able to see this light like 300 meters away.
Yeah, but if
It's
we keep
because our eyes are photon receptors. It's not about angular resolution for stars.
no, but we didn't bring up angular resolution. We're just talking about the sun. If it reduces in size at 8 minutes,
yeah, but that,
8
it
light
is
minutes.
angular resolution though. When you reduce it and reduce it and reduce it to the point.
Okay, but
where
then
it
you have to
vanishes-
multiply it by just to get to a light day. You have to multiply it by 24 eventually, and then you have to multiply by 365 just to get. You're talking about the sun reducing, doubling
but
its distance
again, it's the
365
light.
times.
That you're going by size of like something like when we look at angular resolution on the planet, we're looking at things that are reflecting light. Stars are incredibly
It's the same thing, though. It's the
powerful.
same
It's
thing.
not. No, it's not.
Wait, the inverse
right,
square law.
all right.
Hold on. I want to
Absolutely
ask him though. The
not.
inverse
It's
square law.
absolutely not
Are you
the
saying the
same time.
inverse square law only applies to light sources, not reflections?
No, the inverse. But it applies to that. But the thing is, the light sources have a lot more light than the reflections do.
He still hasn't addressed the distance change of Polaris. Why is he avoiding that? I think we all know the answer.
Okay.
It's the number of photons that hit our eyes, guys. It's not how far something away is.
All right. So can I just ask a
I
question and you
promise
can
that
school me?
This is easy to do if you guys can just follow the math. It's easy to show that the sun could be visible to our eyes. I mean, the light from the sun could be visible from our eyes if it was an Alpha Centauri distance away, meaning it would look like a little point in the sky with light, but it would hit our eyes because it's not about how big it is. It's about the photons hitting our eyes.
So at what point would it stop being seen?
Again, I know that when I've done the calculations with like say Pluto versus Alpha Centauri.
Never.
And if you look at the size of Alpha Centauri versus Pluto, Pluto would be like 10 times smaller. But the reason we can't see Pluto and we can see Alpha Centauri is there is just an enormous amount of output of light and energy coming from stars.
Can I ask just a couple questions as not a scientist?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of I could be wrong. Is there a certain amount of photons coming off of a star? I mean, there is a certain number. If you could calculate what they are, it would be what it is.
It's ridiculously high. Yeah.
So yes, forget the number. It doesn't matter. So as you increase the radius of that those photons are going to be getting less and less and less, and that's where the inverse. Hold on, let me ask my question, please. So that's where the inverse square law comes in, where every time you double the distance, it's 1/4 of the brightness.
Right.
So when you get so if I went halfway to the moon, would the moon be 4 times brighter? Yes, right. The answer is yes. Would you agree?
The moon is not a star, Dave.
Okay, so
that's not what he's asking.
it doesn't matter. Just hear what I'm saying.
It actually doesn't matter.
Wait. So the inverse square law does not apply to the light coming off of a full moon.
Again, it's not about the inverse square law. It's about the number of photons. That's what.
But okay, so the number of photons is 4 times as many when I'm halfway there in the same square foot of space.
Okay, right. Yeah, when you got.
So is that a yes?
Right, but there's a lot less light. A lot less.
So hang on. I'm not comparing the amount of light. So I got a square foot box. I'm looking.
Okay.
I would be done with this in 30 seconds if you just hear me out and just answer. And then I want to throw it back to you because this is about you getting your information out there. We don't want to stop you. So I got a square foot. I got moonlight coming in. I go halfway to the moon. Now there's 4 times the amount of moonlight in that square box. Agreed? Halfway again, there's now 16 times. And if I go all the way to 100 miles from the moon, it should be over 60 times brighter than the sun. According to the inverse square law,
No,
according to math.
the surface, you do know the inverse square law goes by the radius
Just
of
leave
the
your camera
celestial
on,
object,
Austin.
right?
Sorry.
When I
Yeah.
take, like, what, for instance, a gravitational drop off from the Earth, the 1 over r squared is not r from the surface, it's r from the center. You got to take the center of celestial bodies to do the 1 over r squared drop off.
All right.
It's a very big r that you're doing 1 over r squared. If you can't, I see what you're doing, but you're going to the surface. You got to look at the r squared as the radius of the moon. Okay, that's a big radius. So when you, I mean, this is gravity, but the light holds the same way. The surface area is going to be related to the curvature, space, time, and gravity. So it's the same kind of thing. You got to look at.
Wow, so he's just stacking all of these presuppositions and assumptions. Now, if they're true, that's fine, but you have to, again, provide the evidence for them if you're being scientific. If we're not being religious, he needs to back up each point he just made. But he's just expecting everybody to take it on blind faith. Doesn't make any sense.
The radius, and you got to go the other direction from.
Okay, so we're off the inverse square law. We're onto the radius. Go ahead. The next point, wherever you want to go.
But all I was trying to get at with that is I've heard your discussion of that, and it's the flaw with that thing is it's not angular resolution, it's actually light that we see. That's why we can see distant stars, because the amount of power, the amount of radiance, the amount of luminosity is just unfathomably large.
So again, this is a red herring logical fallacy, because all of these variables are still in play, and he's still stacking assumptions on top of assumption on other fallacies, which makes his whole line of reasoning completely unscientific. Even if the math is accurate, I'm not disputing the actual math. I mean, I haven't double checked it, but let's say for the sake of argument, let's give it to him. Let's say all the math works perfect. That still doesn't prove what he's alleging.
But
we don't see some stars, right? We don't. Some of them are we can't see.
No, yeah, some we can't see, but I'm saying there's, again, like I'm showing these calculations here, if you do the 1 over r squared from the luminosity, if it drops below 10 to the minus 10 watts per meter squared, then our eyes won't pick it up. So right, that's why we only see 5 or 6 or 7,000 stars in the night sky.
And I think, isn't it true, out of all the 5,000 stars or 6,000 stars, whatever it is, that the sun is the third smallest? They tell us that it's an average size star, but it's actually the third smallest out of all stars.
I'd have to look it up. I don't know the answer.
Well, of course they need them to be bigger because they need them to be bigger.
Wow, he doesn't even know that, and he's discussing the subject. That's kind of important. That's kind of important, especially if you consider yourself some kind of an expert, or at least expert enough to be having this kind of public discussion. I will say this, though. Bryant is just such a likable guy. I mean, he doesn't come off as this unhinged, clueless goof loony. I mean, he does seem relatively clueless, possibly some kind of autism or mental disability that doesn't affect other areas, like he's maybe some kind of idiot savant where he's just a super math genius. Again, I haven't double-checked his math, but let's say he is, just for the sake of argument. But he just doesn't understand basic logic. So he can understand all these advanced math equations, but he can't put 2 and 2 together when it comes to logic, even basic children's level logic. You know, you kind of see this with certain figures in history, like, some kind of superstar musicians or artists where they're just super geniuses in a very, very narrow field, and like they can barely tie their shoes together or understand any kind of basic logic or reason when it comes to anything else. Is that what we're seeing with Bryant? But again, Bryant is light years ahead of any other individual discussing flat Earth debate on the heliocentric globe side, where he's just such a likable guy. Like, I can't help but like this guy. I feel bad for him that he's humiliating himself this badly, but he's such a likable guy. I mean, how do you not like Bryant here? He just seems like such a nice guy, which is what's making this so difficult to do. But again, we're all here, obviously, for educational purposes and to see how logic applies in flat Earth debate. So hopefully this is very educational for everybody. But yeah, no, it's a nice change of pace on the hand that Bryant just seems like a really, really nice guy.
Because they need to explain why we can see them.
It's not about that. It's about luminosity. It's not about the size. It's about how much light it's emitting. Because that's what's dropping off 1 over r squared. It's not the size of the orb. It's the amount of light that's dropping off 1 over r squared. That's what that was the mistake in your Alpha Centauri argument that I heard.
But again, Brian just stacked assumptions there because you don't know the size. So how would you know the size relative to the light being emitted to do those calculations? size and distance. Even if you want to say size is irrelevant, how can size be completely irrelevant though? Because the light being given off, it's X amount of light per X amount of mass, per X amount of matter, right? I mean, you could say you'd still be able, obviously, if something is much more emitting a much more powerful light, even if it's much smaller and it's emitting a more powerful light, you would see it. But again, when you're arguing anything, I mean, you kind of need to know the dimensions, right? Because otherwise, like, what exactly are you arguing here? Because if you don't know the distance and you don't know the dimensions, I mean, obviously, if it's emitting much more powerful light, yes, you would see it across a greater distance. I don't think anybody's disputing that. So is this just, again, another stacked straw man here on Brian's side?
If you do the math, the closest star, how many times brighter than the sun would it have to be for us to see it?
Well, I mean, it's over 100 times more. And but you know, like Polaris is like 48 times the size of the sun. It's much bigger than. I mean, Alpha Centauri is about the same.
It's 48 times the size of the sun, and it's like 900 quadrillion times farther.
I know, but again, you got to take the calculation. Again, this is why when you don't do math, you can't see it.
This is why when you stack House of Cards of assumptions, you still haven't proved the original point, while pretending and hallucinating that all of those layers of stacked cards are legit, therefore the math is legit. I mean, you can add up all the unicorns in the world, but without first proving that they're unicorns, the math is irrelevant.
Wait.
For you guys,
Dave, could you just repeat everything you just said, Dave, your last sentence? Maybe he didn't hear you.
So
I did hear him because I can do the
how many times brighter is Polaris than the sun? Is it twice as bright? Because I can't imagine something twice as bright as the sun.
It's not.
It's way more than twice.
I know. I'm just saying I can't imagine twice as bright.
It's unfathomably bright. It's very.
We'll agree with that. I mean, that it would have to be unfathomably bright.
Well, but again, you got to realize that astrophysicists map out the stars and have very.
That's another thing he says. You got to realize. Realize what? The real lies? Do real eyes realize real lies? I mean, what is he talking about? You got to realize that's like his default catchphrase. Like, you got to take on blind faith, isn't it?
Precise equations where they do very.
But
I'm not an astrophysicist, but I mean, I look.
But
at
all the stars
data.
don't move, right? All the stars relative to each other don't move, so they could legitimately make up any number that they wanted, right?
They do move.
No, they don't move in relation to each other. So I'm saying you could
They actually do. The apparent motion of the stars does move.
Wait, hold on a second. Apparent motion. So, well, Jeranism is saying is here in relation to each other. So now, claiming they move without being able to tell that they move, I mean, what is that statement worth? Because if they're always in the same spots night after night, despite these vast distances, if they're really being traveled, they don't appear to move even if they do. So what is arguing? I mean, again, science is based on observations, not saying, okay, they actually do move, but it's not observable. So therefore, I mean, science is all about observation, experimentation, repetition, clear identification of variables and controls. So does Bryant not know any of this? This is first grade science. First grade science here.
But
apparent motion?
I'm skipping over.
But do you recognize that if we all got together before anybody got here and we assigned distances and luminosity to the stars, that we could just assign to them? How is somebody going to disprove it?
Do you guys understand how astrophysicists work? It's a lot. It's like years of careful looking through many observatories.
All right, again, he's stacking reification logical fallacies, hasty generalization logical fallacies, appeal to authority logical fallacies. He's stacking all these fallacies. Do you not realize? Like, do you know how long priests have been going to seminary school? It's not just one guy this year. I mean, there have been priests going to many different seminary schools over many different years where they carefully analyzed the Bible. They carefully analyzed all these people that spoke to God. They speak to God themselves. I mean, you got to realize, it's not just now in this one guy. It's all stacked on top of this history of seminary schools and talking to God in all these religions. Therefore, it must be true. I mean, how silly is Bryant here? Again, I just feel bad for this guy.
and they're off by 100 light years.
They look real close.
Hilarious.
Real close. Real close.
I mean, it's not that they don't make mistakes. It's just that I don't know about that, so I have to look it up.
Trust the science. Don't question the science until they tell
Not
you the
about
science
not
is wrong.
questioning the science. Is that a lot of things fall in perfect alignment and make a lot of sense when you study it.
I mean, the Bible, it all falls into perfect alignment on how God created the earth and did all these things, and all the prophets. It all, when you study the Bible, it all makes sense, right? You got to realize there's been a lot of priests going to seminary school for a long time here.
If I made a model about Superman flying, and then I saw a shooting star, and I said that's Superman flying, and the math matched, but that means Superman was flying.
You guys pick like one. You guys look for the one flaw and then ignore all the other things that are making excellent predictions.
Whoa. Okay, let's tackle that. That's hilarious psychological projection. So, well, first of all, we got to give him credit because he's admitting that the flaw, he's not hallucinating that there are no flaws, but for whatever reason, he has a blind faith in that there are no other flaws. So he's hallucinating that only the flaws that have been determined to be flaws are the real flaws and nothing else could be a flaw. And he's saying, oh, it all matches up. Everything matches up perfectly and is predicted perfectly. Well, the ancients all predicted perfect eclipses and everything with their flat earth cosmologies and the world on the back of the tortoise and all that. And they're building pyramids that line up with eclipses. I mean, the predictive power is just amazing. That means it's true, right? I mean, how clueless is Brian here? I mean, a lot of these goofs that argue publicly, they're just obsessed with predictions while ignoring the scientific method and controls and the fallibility of humans and logical fallacies. That's the problem here. They're only focused on predictions. If some claimed psychic just happens to predict a bunch of things by guessing and it all turns out to be true and they really think that we're living in some kind of computer program, I mean, maybe we are and maybe they're right. But just accidentally guessing what appears to be true, even if it doesn't really appear to be true, because if you have to take a whole bunch of things on blind faith in order for the predictions to appear to be true, I mean, what does that mean? Again, plenty of the ancients predicted all of these astronomical movements and eclipses and all these things perfectly. The Mayan calendar actually needs less adjustment than the modern Gregorian calendar. What does that tell you? That means we should just default to the Mayan cosmology because their predictions are better, right, Brian?
You know, and then
because excellent predictions doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that we just accept it then.
Who's the scientist that said that?
They made predictions about the eclipses before that they knew the Earth was round. They knew about eclipses back.
Your model can't even predict eclipses. I mean,
what do you mean?
Dude,
what are you
NASA
talking
uses
about?
a geocentric model and the Saros cycle to this day. They don't have a three-body equation, but this is the problem. Everyone says predictions, but that's not true.
Geocentric is still a spherical Earth.
But Brian, yeah, okay, but it's not moving.
Oh, bonus point for Bryant there. He was able. Okay. This is interesting. I think Bryant definitely is my favorite guy in terms of non-laughing at the goof because he's such a nice guy. But he also has, now it's not saying much, but he also has demonstrated the most brain power out of anybody arguing on the globe side. So this is, I mean, you know, it's a nice change of pace. It's a nice change of pace because he is making valid points here and there. That's more than we've seen from like the Professor Daves or the Anthony Cumia and all these Neil deGrasse Tyson, all these other clueless goofs, Joe Rogan, that argue for the globe model that are just basically completely brain dead. At least Bryant has some kind of brain power capability. Not in the area of logical fallacies, not even in the area of applying the basic scientific method to this topic, but he still has made valid points like that one. Geocentrism is obviously not proof of a flat Earth. It could be a geocentric globe. Bonus points for Bryant here.
And so, but the problem is, it's not predictions, it's post-dictions. Okay? We make observations, and then we take the math and we make it work in our model. It doesn't predict things that aren't already known.
Wow. Total demolishing by Witsit. I mean, Witsit is really on point. Like I said at the beginning, I mean, Michael Jordan's kind of been sitting on the bench, but now he's in. And I mean, that was just pure decimation. Excellent point by Witsit. It is after the fact predictions and then matching reverse engineering whatever model to make it look like the predictions were accurate by reverse engineering all the math.
takes what is known and then it reverse engineers the math.
You guys have no model. You can't even predict why things fall.
So that means that
So now he went tu quoque, hasty generalization. He just basically attacked it instead of addressing what Witsit just said, which completely annihilated Bryant's point. He just completely goes tu quoque. No, you're just doing this. You don't have money. But he didn't address anything that Witsit just said. I mean, this is just sheer destruction. Jordan's putting up 60 points.
it must be not true.
Well,
I get it.
hopefully we'll get to that, and I will show you you're drastically wrong about that.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to get to hear what you guys have to say about gravity.
That's why I'm hoping we just move on past all the reification fallacies and the, you know.
Okay.
We all went to kindergarten. I mean, we know the basic stuff that you believe, you know.
Easy, Sean. Easy.
I mean, this is why I wanted to do
Poke number one.
No, Brian, I'm just playing. Brian, it's a joke.
I know,
man.
but
Brian, and by the way,
I can't have a discussion with 4 people. It's
well, we're all making the same.
He can't have a discussion with 4 people. Hasn't he taught? Didn't he keep mentioning how he taught all these classes? Did he not allow discussion in the class? Did nobody allowed to ask questions or anything? They just had to remain silent the entire time. He can't handle a conversation with 4 people. And I have to say, like, these flat earthers here, they're being way more polite than any kind of debate where there's a flat earther on with multiple globe earthers who are usually not polite again and just spam ad hominem logical fallacies and clueless ramblings like so-called Professor Dave in that previous analysis. I mean, not a lot of people are more clueless and rude than that goof. But these flat earthers are being pretty respectful. I mean, Hibbler cracked that joke there, but he still did it in a respectful fashion and, you know, without the name calling or the expletive.
It could be one person saying all of the same stuff. This is just a little more efficient.
I can agree to be
ahead.
quiet. I've got a toothache going. It's not the
We'll be
greatest, so
quiet.
I'll be
Go
quiet.
ahead. Everybody mute. Go ahead. Good, Brian.
This is what I feared was going to happen. But anyway.
No, don't. What are you fearing?
Wait, he feared people would actually have questions and call him out on his logical fallacies? He was expecting them to just take his word on blind faith, like his students do at the indoctrination facilities he works at. It's funny.
We're having a great conversation. Come on.
Yeah.
You were afraid that maybe we'd make some sense. Maybe
No,
that's
it's not making sense. I just can't explain. I mean, I've heard all your
He can't explain. He can't explain anything scientifically without defaulting to fallacies. Is that a Freudian slip there?
stuff, Dave, and everything I can. You know, it's not difficult to.
But you're just dismissing everything outright. You're not.
I'm not dismissing it outright. I can do.
He just did. He just completely ignored Witsit's very valid point about post-dictions and reverse engineering math. He didn't even reference it. He just completely ignored it and started attacking them for not having a model, instead of addressing the main point, which completely obliterated the argument that Bryant was making the past half hour.
I spent hours doing these calculations and doing experiments.
And that's kind of sad because he spent all this time without even understanding the basics of the scientific method, without even understanding the basic logical fallacies. I mean, that's sad. And I genuinely feel bad for the guy because this guy seems like such a nice guy and such a likable guy. I mean, he's definitely my favorite globe Earth representative thus far on any of these debates I've looked at. So, Brian, you've got my vote.
Okay,
so I can show to myself that this is not true.
Okay, so show back the image you had before this. You just had the sun above the flat Earth.
Okay, yeah. So again,
but hold on. Go back to the image you had. You showed us the sun above the flat Earth. You had arrows drawn to it or lines drawn to it. Said, "Can we?"
Yeah,
one more.
I mean, this
that one.
again. I know. Again, I know you guys get this all the time, but I've heard your argument. But
do you realize how close the sun and moon would be to the Earth? That is ridiculous, right there. That the sun and moon, if they're 3,000 miles, is what?
Are they 3,000 miles?
No, I'm saying even if they were. Right? A lot of people think it's much, much closer. And the sky is much closer.
If there's much, much closer, then we'd be getting hotter going up in altitude. I mean,
because the sun lights up, the sun heats up air. It doesn't heat up just because it's the sun. You can get closer to the sun and it's not going to be hotter.
Really? You're going to really say that? Like, you can get closer to the sun, it's not going to get hotter?
Wait, so Bryant's never climbed a mountain? So he thinks it's hotter at the top of a mountain than the bottom of a mountain? Really? Oh man, come on, Brian.
Have you ever been on a mountain at the equator? You think it's sunny and
Right,
beautiful
because
up there?
the sun is 93 million miles away, and the reason that it's colder at the high altitudes is because there's less atmosphere.
That's what I just said.
So now it's moving the goalposts and red herrings stacked on top of each other because we just said get closer to the sun. So, I mean, sure, you could nitpick and do all this and cherry pick and try to invalidate by moving the goalposts, but the original point was close to the sun. So on top of a mountain, you're still closer to the sun. So if he wants to make a more specific argument, he could, but he just made himself look clueless right there.
That's what I just
Right,
said.
but I'm saying if you have a local sun, that doesn't make any sense going up in altitude for it to drop in temperature.
It
should
does.
be
It
getting
does the
hotter.
same. What?
What?
If you have a local sun and you go up in altitude, you should be getting hotter, not colder.
Why? It's the same atmosphere being lit up. It's the same atmosphere being
No,
warmed
it's
up.
a lot. I know, but 93 million miles away is the light comes in more or less parallel, not exactly, and it's it's coming in at a much more uniform. If you have a local sun, you're going to have hot spots right below where it's floating.
And we
The
see
air
hot
is less
spots.
dense.
All right, let's agree to move on.
Okay.
Okay, like
I mean, that's presupposing like a lot of variables, circular reasoning, logical fallacy, strawman, because, I mean, he's again trying to plug in the parameters of the heliocentric globe universe into a possible flat Earth model and plug in the same parameters and use that to prove it wouldn't work, which is obviously clueless goofery.
okay, now sunsets. This is one I've seen in your documentaries where you have, and even Dave uses this sometimes, where he has the sunset fade back and disappear. Well, I lived on Siesta Key for 7 years, and I actually did sun gazing for a year, and I watched almost every day when it was sunny and I could do so, the sun sink all the way down. I mean, I was staring at it, and it really did look like this. It wasn't just vanishing or disappearing or getting smaller. You know, the sun does not get smaller when it sets. It stays the same relative size. And anybody with a good solar camera and a solar filter, a solar filter on a camera, can see that the actual size of the sun does not get smaller.
And again, so
And-
there's, if you've looked at certain people, they've shown that if you take two tennis balls and you take that camera up away from the tennis balls, then they don't reduce in size when they're away from each other. So
No, that's not how perspective works. I'm
but
sorry.
it is how perspective works. So
No, it doesn't. Perspective works. You understand the equation for perspective, 2 arctangent of x over or
Cool.
d the distance.
oh,
away.
that's how it works. Oh, I didn't know the math on it.
No, but I'm saying that what that equation is showing is that it's basically angular resolution. That's the angular resolution equation. Is that as we see things in the distance, they get smaller towards the vanishing point.
But
The
not
reason the
things,
sun-
not things on a ceiling that are far away from you. They would maintain. I can show you.
Everything that
Let me. I have it right here.
Oh, thank you.
I,
There you go.
I have.
Perfect.
I have an example right
Yes, sir.
here. So, hold on. Let me just show you.
You're already
because-
shaking. You're already shaking your head.
You're-
So he's already shaking his head and grabbing his head. Is this somebody engaging in objective, logical, neutral debate? Like he's refusing to hear their rebuttal. He's refusing to look at the experiments? Is that a man of science or is this a religious individual who's considering this blasphemy and he doesn't even want to look at the blasphemy?
Just show
Well,
you.
you're already
because
shaking. You're already shaking your head.
You're,
He hasn't-
you're making a claim.
But hold on.
You're making a claim.
Hold on, Brian.
You're saying you don't believe it.
You
Let
don't
us
wanna
show
see the
you.
example?
Brian, I don't.
Let us show you the example.
He says
and
he
then,
has-
then we'll move on.
But I don't understand why when you say you have an example, he just shakes his head and he's all upset. Like I'm not going to look at anything. Why would you be like that?
Why
not
wouldn't
just-
you look at?
why not
Let
look?
us show you what he said. Let us show you a physical example, not a calculation, an actual
I mean,
measurement.
He's already dismissed it. It's kind of like pointless. What is
Well,
he
it's
going to?
not. I've seen it though. I've seen.
And
this
what
You've
already.
seen
so
this.
So now, why are you just said how perspective works, and he's going to about to disprove what you said? So how have you seen it, and you still are
A
saying the same
meme
thing?
versus reality is what
No,
I'm talking
this
about.
this
here.
is a camera. This is not.
This is a
how your
meme.
eyes. This is not how your.
This is
eyes-
exactly
That's
how
how
your
the eyes
eyes would
work.
see it.
No, your eyes will see that ball getting smaller in the distance.
It is smaller in the
So,
distance. Look,
you see the ball in the distance right here? It's smaller because
Yeah,
it's farther away.
Right. That's
Okay,
how.
But
Now
when something is already far away from you, so now we're up high. You could flip it over if you're looking up in the sky, and they're both pretty close to the same size. And as it moves, it's almost the same size. Okay.
Well,
And when you said depending on a camera, good solar filter, the sun doesn't change size. Many times it has changed size. We show that the sun does change size.
So again, this doesn't prove anything because again, we have to look at controls, variables, independent, dependent variables, and you'd have to know the distance to the sun. See, that's the problem here. None of this proves anything. It doesn't prove flat Earth. It doesn't prove globe Earth. It doesn't even definitively prove how perspective works, because when you're missing variables, you wouldn't necessarily know what something would look like. I actually go over this in the Critical Flaw in Flat Earth Debate podcast. For anybody that hasn't looked at that podcast, this is the gist of it. Because reality is whatever it is. Everybody can agree on that. That's not completely mentally disabled. It is what it is. It might not even be a flat or globe Earth. It's whatever it is. If it's some kind of weird computer program that's switching back and forth between flat and globe Earth just for kicks to trigger people, if that's what the computer program is, that's what it is. It's whatever it is. Reality is what it is, independent of what random humans believe. So, and for some reason, none of these goofs can get that on any side of this debate. I mean, Witsit might be able to understand this. He seems pretty sharp. I don't know if anybody's ever actually asked him what he thinks of that concept. But it is whatever it is. So again, do train tracks touch in the distance? They look like they touch. Doesn't mean they touch, though. So the way perspective would work with an object of an unknown distance away, where you would not be able to do the math without knowing how far away it was. So how bright is it? Yes, you can measure the current brightness, but how would you know the difference in brightness, whether it was closer or farther, if you don't know the current one? I mean, this isn't rocket science. These are basics. And to identify that there's an unknown variable. Now, if you're claiming it's known, again, the burden of proof is on positive claims, then prove it. Just randomly defaulting to appeal to authority in religious arguments. They proved it. It's been decades and decades. You got to realize it's been decades and decades they've studied it. So, for decades and decades, if they thought the world was flat, I mean, they would be using the same argument, right? For decades and decades, they know it's flat. I mean, that's not an argument. That's just fallacies.
But it's a little different every day, depending on the atmosphere, what's going on, and what you're looking at.
Yeah,
But it does clearly change size.
It changes sizes a little bit throughout the year based on our distance from the sun, but it's not much.
Okay, so he just admitted that it does change size. Again, these are all different variables. Now, yeah, Bryant is a curious one, because clearly his brain functions good enough to understand that his argument was false. So now he's kind of, again, moving the goalposts and changing definitions, but then claiming it doesn't disprove his original point. I mean, it's really weird. Again, I really just feel bad for this guy.
It changes over the same day. The same
Solarium says
day.
it changes throughout the day. It actually gets
Not
smaller
very much.
and bigger throughout the day. Solarium data does.
Depending on the weather conditions and what part of the Earth you're on, in my opinion.
There might be some refraction, but in general, the sun stays the same.
Good point. There might be some refraction. There might be some of a lot of things. And without knowing all of them, you really can't make any kind of conclusions based off of this. I mean, so I don't know how Bryant doesn't understand that. I mean, it's quite basic.
Size during the whole.
It also can magnify at times too. It's an optical illusion, in my opinion.
A little bit.
And
that
Brian,
didn't do it at all.
I'm the same distance. I'm straight over this ball, and the other ball is pretty much the same size.
But that's not the perspective works. Perspective
That
is from
exactly how perspective works.
No, it isn't. Perspective is from your eyes going out, Dave, not from the top looking down.
Well, when you're looking at
No,
the
it's
sun, is
supposed
it
to be
your eyes
flipped.
going out, or is your eyes looking up? Same thing as looking down. When you're looking at the sun,
No,
if
instead-
the sun was right in front of you, literally in front of your face, and went away, it would get smaller. But because it's up high, so your sun's this would be their sun, and it would get smaller, sure. But because it's up high, you don't have that perspective.
Picture looking that in this. That's in the sky. Don't picture like
Yeah.
we're looking down. Flip it up in the air.
I'm looking up in the sky. Here's the sun at noon, and here's the sun at sunset.
I have a question. Has Bryant ever been in a planetarium? Does he not understand how any of that works? Now, again, I'm not claiming that that's what's going on in the universe, but if it is, theoretically, it could work that way, right? Because it works that way in a planetarium.
Yeah.
That's how perspective works. I'm showing you.
That's not how perspective works.
So just basic, flat-out denial. That's what he's been reduced to. Just blatant. No, not how it works. He can't disprove any of it. He just, says, oh, well, the math works. Well, even if the math works, again, how many variables are being considered? That's why the scientific method is important. You need controls, dependent, independent variables. I mean, there's so many unknown variables here. How can you make any conclusive claims in either direction?
But okay,
We're looking at it.
All right. Listen,
All right.
This is
it's
how
okay. Listen, guys.
perspective-
This is okay. We can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Everyone makes up their own mind on how that one worked out. Let's go to the next point.
I know, but this is okay. This is perspective. This is how perspective works. But okay, we'll just move on.
That's not. Hold on. That's not. I'm not going to let you say that. That's not how perspective works.
A meme
Not at
versus
all.
reality.
No, it's not. It's a calculation of. This is angular resolution. It's based on
That's
this
not accurate.
Okay, but nobody ever is seen
this-
from the side view like this ever. That's not how perspective works.
Well, it's not from the side. It's just trying to show you this is the equation for calculating how your angular resolution when an object goes off in the distance.
So it's just a fundamental lack of understanding of burden of proof. So again, doing perfect math with unicorns and Superman and flying spaghetti monsters wouldn't prove that they exist even if the math works. It's just weird. Brian can't grasp that children's level concept for some reason.
It gets smaller.
Halves and
It's
doubles,
based on
right?
this is a known perspective. This is how perspective works. When you look at something in the distance, it gets smaller by this relationship.
Halves. It's called halves and doubles when they talk about art. In art, perspective is halves and
The
doubles.
arctan is not but this is just it's a pretty well-known equation that even
Okay.
like opticians and optometrists know for angular resolution. And so when you take this idea, it's just a simple.
No, but that's not how we see things. That line that you've
I
drawn
know,
there.
but the sun can never set and get close. In fact,
That's
you
not
have
true.
to go like a million miles away.
No.
it
So imagine that
to
you're in a
get to-
Brian. Imagine you're in a big room that's the room that you're in right now. Now picture that it's 5 miles wide. Okay, just picture you're in a 5 mile wide room like you're in. If that light above your head started to go away from you, would it not connect with the floor very quickly?
No,
What do you mean? So
Not-
you're going to see
not on this. No, it's based on.
I asked you to take the room that you're in. Imagine that it's 5 miles wide. Okay, 5 miles wide in every direction, and the ceiling is still there. Now the light that's on the ceiling, if it starts to go away from you, it's going to merge with the floor, hit the floor, and set. And it'll even get dark where you're at. In your location, it would get dark and it would light up the other end of the room.
Okay, but again, the ceiling is very close to 5 miles.
So is the
away.
sky is very close to the earth.
Again,
It wouldn't matter. Even if the ceiling was much higher, the same, I mean, it'd have to go farther, but it would be the same effect. And again, Brian's just grasping at straws here not to give them credit for the example. Now, that doesn't mean that's what's going on outside. Jeranism just asked him as a thought experiment to understand how it would work if it was that. Again, there's an old quote. I don't know if it's attributed to Aristotle or Socrates, whatever. I mean, they might have not even said it, but it is the mark of an educated mind to consider a concept or idea as true without believing in it. Without believing in it. Nobody's asking Bryant to believe that that's what actual reality is, but just to understand the concept. It's very simple. Giant warehouse. David Weiss made those points too. Those are good points. That doesn't mean the earth is flat in any way, but it does mean that it could theoretically work like that. Obviously, you'd have to prove it. The flat earthers haven't provided any proof that actually is the flat earth, but they have completely dismantled Bryant here. Just complete annihilation in terms of argumentations and fallacies used. Also, what's interesting, the flat earthers haven't really made too many positive claims either. They're just dismantling Bryant's arguments, which are all based on faith and fallacy.
if in the brightness, the point is to the brightness of the sun. You're not going to get something as bright as the sun down a hallway, because if you did, you would see it.
Well, again, now he's plugging in the parameters, like it's again using Bible quotations to prove God. If someone doesn't believe in the Bible, like why are you using the parameters of a model? It's just, again, children's level concepts here.
Because
Okay,
again, it's photons that hit your eyes, it's not
Brian.
a resolution.
Also, he went red herring and moving the goalposts again because he didn't address what they specifically said. He actually, to be fair, he did address those points regarding the Aristophanes sticks and shadows alleged experiment, where obviously it could work either way depending on the variables. He did acknowledge that, but for some reason, this was I guess his cognitive dissonance was too extreme here. He's too triggered.
Brian, is it possible that you've never seen my Sunset Kitchen?
It's possible.
Vamos a hacer de cenar rapidín, pim, pim,
These little. Okay.
But I have a question for you.
I'll
Is
watch.
it possible you've never seen it?
I don't know that I've seen this one. No.
Okay, so let me. It's 1 minute, so just watch before you shake your head. No. So this line here is the path of the sun, and I'm viewing it from a celestial point of view, and I'm watching. Oh, it's not playing. Oh, now it's playing. And so it's moving along. Now this here can be mountains. It could be cloud deck. It could be just the atmospheric deck. I never go below it, and the sun moves along. Now I have another camera on the deck, on the ground, on the other side, looking at that same thing. And when I look, the sun goes down due to perspective. And this opaque barrier right here, which is now at my eye level, but it's really not, but it looks like it is. The sun looks like it's going below it, but it's not. It's going straight. And when I look at it really close, look at this line. This is a level line. It's level. But it looks, hold on, I'm not done. It looks like it's going down. Now let's compare it to a real sunset. We're just going to compare. Here's the sun. It went down, 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 down. And now look what's going on. It's going behind this atmospheric deck or mountain ridge or whatever.
Okay, now that I can tell you is not the way sunsets work. I have seen countless sunsets on.
So what are you saying? That's a fake video?
No, this can be one sunset with a certain atmospheric conditions, but in general, what you get more than often than not is a hard fall. And I used to sun gaze on.
So, but in general, you're going to get the same effect once it hits another tree line or mountain range or artificial horizon.
Wait, but also you see the space here between where it's setting. Hold on. Just let me make my point, and we'll go right back to you. I'm telling you, the space between here and the ground, you can't see it. It looks like it's the same. It's compressed. I'm zoomed in here. And if I zoomed out, this would literally look like it's going behind a hard horizon, but it's just because your eye can't see it.
You zoom in, and this is what you get. No matter how far you zoom, you're going to always get a hard cutoff with the
right. Yeah. And here's the hard cutoff right here. Here's the hard cutoff. If I put a solar filter on, you wouldn't see the difference between this water and this hard thing. You would just see the sun, just like you're seeing it in yours.
But that's not fully set. It's still
it is fully set if you zoomed out.
I know, but I can't see it because you're so small. I mean,
well, okay.
I think I've seen this picture before though, and I remember saying to myself, "That's not really that's going behind some refractive."
But he completely missed the point. Behind whatever, water, mountains, air. He completely missed the point, possibly intentionally. I mean, perhaps now is a good time for that Upton Sinclair quote. It's very difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. But what's weird is that if he were truly at a certain level of intelligence, I mean, this doesn't prove flat Earth in any way. It could still be a globe Earth. This could work on a globe Earth exactly this way. I believe the flat earthers admitted that at the beginning, right? Where David Weiss was talking about your maximum distance that you see would be a circle. So on a globe, if it was a globe of whatever, however big, like relatively large, obviously not a tiny little globe, but thousands and thousands of miles, if not larger, it would work this way regardless. So it's just interesting that Bryant is just arguing with such religious fervor where he doesn't want to cede any of these points that clearly demonstrate that on a flat or globe Earth it would still work this way based on these other variables. This is not rocket science.
So effects are
so look, here it looks like the sun's going behind a hard line, but if we zoom in, it's really not even setting. Okay, so here we go. We're going to zoom in. Jaron, can you make me big so you can see it?
Yes.
As I zoom in, you look. Oh, look, it's not even touching the horizon.
No, because it hasn't set yet.
But it will set because it's going to go behind this opaque barrier. This opaque barrier is thousands of feet above my eye line, but it looks like it's at eye level. This opaque barrier is thousands of feet.
How can that be thousands of feet above your eye line?
What do you mean?
These clouds above my eye line?
So this is prime cognitive distance written right over his face. I don't know if his triggering level just vastly increased because at least his subconscious recognized all his arguments were completely obliterated. Again, that doesn't prove the flat earth is true, but the reasoning he was using to justify his globe Earth belief was absolutely fallacious and he got demolished. So now his triggering level has increased so exponentially, he's not even going to objectively, logically, neutrally even try to understand any of these points. He's still a nice guy, though.
They don't pick
Right. As they go into the distance,
but
everything
if-
merges in. The clouds
if you-
are all at the
if you
same
guys
height.
buy into a flat Earth, then that's how could it be 1,000? It doesn't make any sense.
So hold on a second. So when I'm looking down Long Island Sound here, the clouds touch the water 25 miles away. They
Appeal to incredulity is also a logical fallacy there. Claiming something doesn't make any sense because he can't wrap his mind around it, obviously due to cognitive dissonance. I actually think he's smart. Unlike all these other goofs like Professor Dave, Simon Dan, I actually think Bryant is smart enough to understand some of these concepts if he wasn't triggered.
literally touch the water. So the curvature in 25 miles is only a few hundred feet. Okay. So you're telling me clouds that are at 5 or 10,000 feet have gone over that much curvature and are actually going behind a curve, or is it just perspective? I mean, I just proved that it was just perspective.
No, you didn't prove anything. That's not proof of anything. That the sun
So
is going
it curvature?
Dave, the reason
I'm talking
say
about the
this-
clouds.
Listen, I told you
Go
I
ahead.
lived on Siesta Key for 7 years, and I did sun gazing for a year. I watched countless sunsets, and I'm telling you,
So this is an anecdotal logical fallacy because he's using only information from that particular area to try to prove something. Again, depending on atmospheric conditions and all these other things, things appear different in different places. So yes, his experience and his experiments might be valid, but it doesn't prove anything either way anyway, as David Weiss just proved. So I don't know why he's even arguing or bringing up these anecdotal logical fallacies, because, and he already admitted that in different atmospheric conditions in different places, the size of the sun does change. So he already admitted that himself.
yes, there's some days where refraction, you got clouds going on and all kinds of different things.
All kinds of different things. Exactly.
But almost every time the sun goes not behind, it goes down below the horizon. That horizon is not
Beyond. Go ahead.
It's not 1,000 feet above my head. It's dipping below the horizon. That's impossible on a flat Earth.
What?
It's going away from
He just demonstrated how it's easily possible on a flat Earth. That doesn't mean it's happening. It doesn't mean the Earth is flat. But you got to give David Weiss credit because he demonstrated clearly exactly how that would happen on a flat Earth. It would happen the same way on a flatter globe Earth, on a large globe Earth. So, like, the fact that Bryant can't even recognize how this is completely useless argumentation, except for educational purposes, and for those that find all of these fallacies funny, for entertainment purposes, in analyzing this debate logically. But if you're really trying to figure out the shape of the Earth, I mean, this is not what should be discussed.
What's going
No,
on?
it's going. It's dipping.
It's
below the
exactly what
horizon.
would happen if anything in the sky was going away from you.
If-
Well, what do you think you're supposed to be seeing if a local sun was going away from you? What do you think you'd be seeing?
You'd be seeing it. You wouldn't fall below the horizon. It's impossible. For
So
it to
what
get-
would it do?
It's gonna set way.
Dave,
before-
can you
Go
get your
ahead.
can you get your
smaller.
Legos
Listen,
out?
It's gonna get smaller, and it's gonna go.
No.
No.
If
The
there was
video.
no atmosphere.
He just said that you
and there
can't
was
drop
no
something below a
artificial
horizon.
horizons.
If you have a local sun, that's perspective. It should get smaller. I've even seen.
And sometimes it does.
It has, in some conditions, it has, Bryant. That's what we're saying. Sometimes it does, depending on the weather conditions,
it doesn't.
depending on if
It's
it's
parallel
dry, if
lines.
it's humid.
Also, there's the presupposition if the sun is a physical object. If the sun is some kind of hologram or reflection, would it get smaller? Again, that's something Bryant fails to realize because he's plugging in the parameters of one particular model and using those to disprove another. All tied in to the circular reasoning logical fallacy.
Everything.
Here's one where it was dry and humid, and the sun should just be dropping below, but it's going away. It's getting smaller.
That's
It's getting
the
dim.
camera. That's the camera. If you get the right filters and the right,
Oh, the right filter.
it's always the same size. Any really good photographer that takes pictures of the sun knows it stays relatively. Again,
Are
different
you
times.
watching Dave's screen or no?
I'm seeing it right, but that's through a camera. That's through. Who knows if it's auto exposure or you're set to manual? I mean, to really get a true picture of the sun, you got to set to manual because some,
I know.
But wait a second. Regardless of the settings, I mean, obviously it would look different with different settings, but why would it? What's the explanation for why it looks like that? just pretending that, oh, okay, those are settings. But that still wouldn't explain it. Yeah, with different settings, it wouldn't have as much haze, or the circle, let's say, would be smaller in the first place, whatever. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be getting even smaller. Or even if it did stay the same size and didn't get smaller, why does it look like it's moving away instead of down like in other videos? Again, because of all these other things and all these other variables, but Brian is just pretending it's just the camera? What?
Because
I know.
some telescopic cameras will they like make things look distorted because that's autofocus is doing stuff like that.
I know you said you saw my son fade out videos. I have a whole bunch of them. You have my app. I have them all on there. But the sun went down, 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 down. Forget the fade out. It went down, 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 and then it stopped. And it sat here.
It doesn't stop.
It does. No, it's not going down anymore. It's going away.
Oh, it's not.
I mean, Brian is just denying what he's seeing in the video. Now, why that's happening, that's a completely separate argument. Nothing to do with flat Earth or globe Earth, but he's just, his cognitive dissonance. I mean, look at his face here. He's just so triggered that he can't even handle the points being presented. I mean, you don't have to concede anything in terms of what that means for the shape of the Earth, because again, all these unknown variables, but the cognitive dissonance and the triggering is so extreme that he's refusing to even address what's right in front of his eyes.
God, David, I've watched.
It's going down.
Are you talking to people that don't live on the beach? You must be talking.
No. Actually, during the filming of this one, I was talking to people on the beach. Hold on. I was on the phone with my friends that were at the beach, and they saw the sunset from the bottom up 10 minutes earlier.
Yeah, I mean, again, there can be exceptions.
Whoa! There can be exceptions. What? See, the thing about science, like if you're claiming something works a particular way, like it either works that way or it doesn't, or there's so many other variables in play that would cause these exceptions. That's why you can't make these absolute claims when there's this many variables causing this many exceptions.
When you have some type of refractive things going on, but you're never gonna. I've seen hundreds of sunsets, Dave, and they go below the horizon. They don't.
Well, you're seeing the same thing 100 times. You are seeing the same thing. You just don't understand the power of perspective and the power of the opaqueness, the opaque deck. It's just going beyond it. That's all.
Perspective makes things smaller. It doesn't keep them the same size.
And they sometimes get smaller, but when you're looking out over water, water is the thickest. The atmosphere. The non-uniform transition zone. I probably got that half wrong.
I'll tell you what, Dave. Take that picture of the fade out and go to Siesta Key or some beach and poll 100 people and ask them, is this what they see every night when they watch?
No, they would never see this at Siesta Key because they're on the ground.
It's from a drone, Bryant.
And this is not over water, and it's below freezing. No one's going to be on the beach because they're going to be freezing.
Even if you're high up at an altitude, you're going to still see the sun go down below the horizon.
Over the water, yes.
Right, but it just doesn't. I mean
that air column, as you're looking farther and farther, it becomes opaque. Period.
Well, again, without knowing the height and distance of the sun, how would you know? Again, just these fundamental failures to understand the basics by Brian.
It's also magnifying.
You can't see through atmosphere like that.
The water.
It becomes opaque, and when the sun goes beyond it, it just goes beyond it.
Let's just move on. This doesn't.
All right, move on. No problem. No problem. Great to move on.
Can I show a video about perspective though, real quick? It's a short one, but I think that.
No, I don't want to watch any perspective videos.
All right.
He doesn't want any of his claims rebutted. He doesn't want an open scientific dialogue where burden of proof is called out. He does not want anything scientific here.
Let's go on.
Okay, but
we're never going to get out of this topic if we don't just move on.
All right.
True, but people see perspective the wrong way, and everybody, like when you talked about those guys who did the test and they have the arrows drawn to the sun, then they draw the flat Earth arrow to the sun. They're completely off because that's not how we see.
Well, another thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm just getting a little kind of steamrolled here, but
we're not steamrolling you.
Is that one of the points I wanted to bring up? The common denominators is that we have confirmation that the sun and Polaris and many other things will have the same angular, they have a relationship between latitude and where you live on a sphere. So we see these different angles because of us living on a sphere in different locations. And it's really just really hard to explain. I mean, you can't really explain on a flat Earth that you got a different angle of sunrise and sun. The way that sun pass trajectory is based on us being on a spherical Earth.
That's based on perspective.
That's not perspective.
Well,
I wanted to show you a video. I wanted to show you a video, but you won't look.
You can look up at, no, it's real simple. You can look up at high noon and you can see the
But that's not how we see things. If you need to watch a video where if you stand next to like a gymnasium, the bleachers, you can see how perspective actually works.
I don't even. Yeah, this is.
The globe model claims we never
You're
see the
just gonna
actual
always
position
bring
of
up
the sun.
perspective
unless
as
it's-
like-
No, it's
try to
not.
do-
But I'm going to show you. I mean, this right here is what I was going to show you. Like, this is how we see. When you watch this video, you can see that it's not. This is how the sun sets from different locations. Everything converges to the same point. You're talking about perspective like we can draw lines this way.
That's not how perspective.
That's
I can't
exactly how
even see-
perspective works.
All right, listen, Jaron, we're gonna have to let it go because I showed him perspective with the actual physical thing. He says that's not how perspective
All right.
works. We agree to move on.
Okay, let's
These are
go.
little models you're doing. This is not, these little models you can do. I've seen tricks with aperture. Like the camera when you open up the wide angle.
Do you have any models?
Bro, you're showing memes, bro. Like, what?
So he's basically just poking holes through actual scientific experiments that David Weiss has done. Now, I'm not claiming those experiments prove anything. I don't see how they prove a flat Earth in any way, but they clearly prove how a theoretical object would look even on a flat plane in this example. That's why it seems like it would just work the same way on a large globe or a flat Earth. So it doesn't prove anything either way, but it does disprove some of Bryant's notions that the math equations supersede visible, observable reality in the scientific method and actual experimentation. Which is sad if Bryant is claiming to be a man of science instead of a man of scientism.
You're
I'm
showing
not-
memes and calculations. We're showing you calculations and physical
I know, but-
things.
But these are based on things that you can see in the real world. I've seen the sunset.
Another dodge. I mean, the immaturity here displayed by Bryant, because he's also, I think one of the biggest issues here is Bryant is too clueless to realize that just because something looks a certain way in David's experiment or whatever, that doesn't prove the Earth is flat. Like, he's behaving like a spoiled child who doesn't get to play with his toy, so he's just denying anything and everything across the board except for like 2 or 3 things this entire time that he did have the mental capacity to concede. But in general, he's just jumping to no, can't be that. Oh, that's because of this. Oh, that's because of refraction. Oh, that must be the camera. It must be some kind of aperture setting, because that's the only explanation. So we got so many false cause logical fallacies. And here he's trying to defend his diagrams and calculations, which, again, the calculations might all be true. He might be some kind of math genius where he calculated everything perfectly. I haven't even seen the flat earthers dispute that. In fact, Witsit, like myself, has admitted that even if the math works perfectly, which it might, I don't think anybody has found an error in Bryant's math. I mean, I actually haven't tried to, because it doesn't even, like, let's give him that bone, because let's say it's perfect, because for the purpose of this analysis, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. It doesn't matter if 1 + 1 unicorns is 2 unicorns. It doesn't matter if the math was absolutely flawless. 10 times 10 unicorns is 100 unicorns. You could do all the math perfectly. It still doesn't prove it. And this alleged man of science, again, is only preaching scientism. You could tell that any kind of contradiction to his blind faith indoctrination, it's like blasphemy to his ears. He doesn't even want to look at any actual experiment showing some kind of a concept in perspective. He doesn't even seem to actually know the definition of perspective. Like earlier, he hallucinated that perspective only applies in certain situations. Like, for whatever reason, something wouldn't be classified under the category of perspective if you're looking down at it or at an angle. Obviously, anything to do with looking at objects in space at different angles, that's all under the umbrella of perspective. But he was so triggered, and this is all such blasphemy to his religious ears, his religious scientism ears, that he can't even take a moment. Like, he immediately always starts shaking his head and denying right away. He immediately goes to false cause or just outright denial. All logical fallacies, of course. Now he's saying that his graphs or whatever he's got up here is representative of real things, which maybe they are. But again, instead of actually addressing the experiments and videos that are actually real in terms of actually taking place in reality as opposed to drawn and using math, which may or may not represent reality, as I keep having this Nikola Tesla quote up here. Today's science have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. And this may or may not have even been said by Nikola Tesla. Many people have different theories on that, but that's besides the point. I mean, if you're being scientific and logical, neutral and objective, you're going to examine arguments based on their own merit. And the concept of that quote is what's important, not even who said it. But if indeed Tesla did say it, I mean, I don't think anybody would be surprised about that. So, Bryant here is the living embodiment of that quote, because he's so obsessed with his equations and whether or not the equations are accurate, and his only defense is, well, it was decades and decades of astronomers did this. Do you not understand astronomers? Like, do you not understand priests going over the Bible for decades and decades? That must mean it's true, because they went over it for decades. If you're doing real science and you have experiments that adhere to the scientific method, you can come to certain conclusions. If all the variables are accounted for and you have controls and you're actually scientific, you can come to relatively sound conclusions in 10 minutes. If you have the technology, of course, the technology, the manpower, everything you need. If you have all of that, whether it's 10 minutes or 10 decades, either something adheres to the scientific method and it can be observed, demonstrated, and repeated, or it can't. But this goof is so obsessed with his equations and predictions, or more accurately, post-dictions, as Witsit astutely pointed out. He's so obsessed with it, and then all he does is default to the tu quo qui logical fallacy, where like, oh, you guys don't even have a model. You guys don't even have a model. You guys can't even explain eclipses. I mean, of course they can explain it. Whether the explanation is true, that's a completely separate topic. But the goof has to pretend and hallucinate that there aren't any kinds of explanations. Clearly, the flat earthers here have come up with many, many explanations, including scientific experiments. Again, I'm not claiming those experiments actually do adhere to the scientific method, but you can easily grasp the concept of the videos David is presenting. And it's really not rocket science. Things look different in different conditions. I mean, this is really the point here. And Bryant is so triggered. He actually sort of conceded the point where he says, oh, well, there could be exceptions, while simultaneously arguing always this or never this. That's how silly this guy is. And again, I feel bad even analyzing to this extent, because I have to be so critical of his flat out goofery, because he seems like such a nice guy, but clearly he's so religious and triggered. I mean, he's literally shaking his head. None are so blind than those who will not see. He does not want to have an open, logical, scientific discussion of any kind. And he's triggered that these people would even question the religious dogma he's preaching. Again, it might be true. All of the religious dogma of scientism that Bryant is preaching, it might all be true. But again, if you're being scientific and non-religious, you must demonstrate that, not expect everybody to just take it on blind faith as gospel, which look how annoyed Bryant is that they're not taking it on blind faith as gospel. Look how annoyed he is when they demand that he adhere to the scientific method. I mean, this is so crazy, because this is downright hilarious on one hand and downright sad and pathetic on the other hand. It's a paradoxical analysis is what we have here, but let's continue.
I know that
We've all seen sunsets.
They don't figure it out.
And that's the other thing that's just beyond silly. I know I keep stopping this every 2 seconds, but I have to, because Bryant's level of goofery is so off the charts. He rebuts points with, oh, well, I used to live in Florida. I watched a sunset, so I know how it works. I mean, not only is this an anecdotal logical fallacy, but it's just flat out denial and dodging of the points they're bringing forth. Explain what they are putting up there. If he's hallucinating to know that the camera was set on autofocus or auto exposure. How does he know that? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the definitive nature in which he hallucinates and brings that forward as if it's definitive, or as if it's aperture, or whatever it is. And then, but he also does have the modicum of basic logic to say, oh, well, in different conditions, it could look different. There could be exceptions. Or he's pretending that David wasn't talking to people who live on the beach, as if that has anything to do with analyzing the video right in front of his face. What difference does it make who David Ice was on the phone with? I mean, yeah, that's part of it, because he was saying they said it already set, whatever. We have to take his word for it, unless it's verified. So, again, I'm not saying anybody should take David Weiss's word for anything, but why not just look at the video and say, oh, okay, well, in certain conditions it could look like that, therefore everything Bryant just said is false regarding his absolute statements of it always does this, or it never does this, or somehow on a flat plane it could never do that. Because how would he know? I mean, you can build the model in 3D software and it does do that. Obviously, that doesn't mean it would do that in real life because, again, there's always unknown variables. This isn't rocket science, but again, Bryant is so silly. He can't even grasp these basic concepts, and he keeps, like, his two things are like, oh, yeah, I've heard you say that. Like, that's not a rebuttal. Like, it's weird. When David makes a point, it's like, oh, yeah, I've heard you say that. Well, are you going to actually address the point, or are you just going to say, oh, I've heard you say that? That makes him look even dumber, because if it's true that he heard him say that, you would think he would prepare some kind of rebuttal or be able to address the points in any way other than just saying, oh, yeah, I've heard you say that, or just flat out denial. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't. I've seen the sunset. I used to live on the beach. Why don't you actually address the points? I mean, Bryant has not brought forth anything scientific this entire time. It's really, really sad.
We've also heard people say they see the curve from a plane.
But they
Most sunsets don't shrink. I agree.
I agree with that too.
Sunsets do not shrink in size, especially because most sunsets are like to be viewed over lakes and water. We can agree on that. Most sunsets we like to watch over water. So it's magnifying. There's a lot of factors involved. So we can agree to disagree. Maybe you just don't understand where we're coming from here, man.
No,
That's all.
Basically,
So he says, I do understand, while proving with every statement he makes that he doesn't understand, because 99% of the time he's arguing against points not even presented. Like David Weiss or Jeranism. Jeranism's actually kind of funny. I don't even know who this guy is, but like the other thing that's kind of sad is Bryant is just being absolutely obliterated by these three young guys and David Weiss. I don't know how old David Weiss is, but whatever. He was a working professional, I think. What was it, the solar panel industry or something? He was some kind of working professional for many years. I guess it wouldn't be that embarrassing to be obliterated by an older guy. But these three young guys, I don't know how old Jeranism is either. He looks kind of young. And then Witsit and Hibbler definitely look really young. And they're absolutely demolishing this guy, this professor, this guy with all of these degrees from indoctrination facilities. And again, like the Upton Sinclair quote, which I threw up earlier too, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something which his paycheck depends on him not understanding, or his salary depends on him not understanding. Like, what Bryant is just getting so obliterated by these youngins, and it's just flat out embarrassing. And that's why he's stuttering and flustering all over the place, and all he can come up with, oh, I've heard you say that. Or, no, it isn't. It doesn't work that way, while being unable to actually address any points or explain it. He flat out even admitted it's hard to explain. Or, let's just move on. That's all he has. Like, he's this utterly poorly prepared, while at the beginning he also claimed to be very familiar with the arguments. He claimed to be very familiar with the arguments. Where is that familiarity? Other than saying, I've heard you say that.
it comes down to either the sun's moving away from you on a flat stationary Earth, or we're falling backwards 700 miles an hour in the United States, or 1,000 at the equator, and it makes the sun look like it's moving. So we'll agree to disagree. I don't think I'm falling backwards during the sunset.
I know you're not.
Falling backwards. That's we'll get to that in high speeds and slow rotations. But
and the other thing is we'll get to that. So instead of actually addressing it, because if he has a good understanding of it, how can he not be able to make like a quick summary? Nobody's asking him to do a 5-hour lecture on every single variable. Just a general explanation of how it would or wouldn't work, either on a globe or on a flat plane. That's all they're asking, and he can't even do that. Again, that doesn't make him not a nice guy. He seems like a very nice guy, but he just can't do anything. He's just so mentally incapable of just putting up any kind of logical defense. Like, they're asking questions, very legitimate scientific questions, and he's got nothing. He's got nothing. And what's crazy is this probably is actually the best defense of the globe, the heliocentric globe model that's been made publicly. And that's really sad because this is light years ahead of anything that Professor Dave goof or that Sci-Man Dan goof, anything they put forward, because they just put forward like kindergarten insults and total incomprehension. Bryant does seem to be somewhat arguing in good faith. He's just too triggered because he's too religious. They're blaspheming against his scientism, and since he doesn't even, part of the religion of scientism is not understanding the difference between real science and the religion of scientism. And that fundamental lack of understanding is actually why we're seeing all of this.
Let's just move on to gravity, because I don't think this is,
Yay.
you're just going to use the same perspective arguments for.
They're just going to use the same, oh, look, here's a video. This is what it looks like, what humans see, which doesn't match the equation that he's claiming represents reality, which even if the equation is accurate, if it doesn't take into account other variables, then it doesn't accurately represent reality. So he's just, he thinks it's a detriment, like he thinks it's a problem to be scientifically skeptical and to demand burden of proof from him, because he's making all these claims and he can't back any of them up, other than the equations, which ignore many other variables.
It's not an argument, it's reality. We're not giving you anything that's not
memes.
We're not
using
whatever,
I've
bro.
seen some of your perspective like videos, and it's not.
Which video?
It's just not based on real. Well,
So all he can say is it's not based on reality. But here's the thing. How is it not based on reality? Like, you actually do see that outside. Obviously, it has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. Again, I have to reiterate that because there's so many triggered goofs that think I'm actually arguing for flat Earth. There's even a couple of triggered flat earthers who think I'm arguing for globe Earth. And then there's a whole bunch of clueless goofs in the middle that are just outraged that this topic is even being discussed, that anybody even wants to look at this topic with logic and reason at the forefront, which is actually, I mean, flat Earth is actually one of the best topics I have found for that. So it's just very, very educational across the board. But that's it. That's really the issue here. He actually can't explain anything. All he has is denial. It doesn't represent reality. No, it doesn't. That's not what it is. And he also refuses to look at the evidence they want to present. He wouldn't even look at a 1 or 2 minute video from that Jeranism wanted to present. So he's claiming to want to have this scientific discussion, but he's being very religious and closed-minded, where he can only regurgitate approved information from his approved scientism religious text. Which, again, even if true, there's always other variables. They might have questions about other variables. So if he's that ignorant of the topic in general, why is he even here?
There's nothing that we're showing that's not
the
based
ones
on
I was
reality.
watching were Nathan Oakley. I was watching some of his videos.
Well, we haven't been watching him.
What does that have to do with what they're saying? He was watching some other videos. Like, what does that have anything to do with the points they're presenting and what's on the screen right now that they wanted to present? Or him not wanting to even watch a 2 or 3 minute video? Like, they're willing to go through all of these diagrams and videos that Bryant is presenting for hours on end. He wasn't willing to give Jeranism 2 or 3 minutes, or even less. I don't know how long that video is. He said it was really short. He wasn't even willing to do that, and he was also protesting as David threw up the video, but then they just kind of threw it up anyway. It was a very short video that he had no rebuttal for. All he could claim was like, no, that's not true. That's all he had. Like a little 5-year-old, having a Batman versus Superman. No, Batman's better. No, Superman better. No, it's not. That's all he had. This is really sad here. And again, it pains me to have to do this because Bryant seems like such a nice guy.
So
Okay. Well, anyway, I've seen like different flat Earth believers have different views on what perspective is. Where
Okay, but why not address what they specifically said? He's always engaging in these red herrings and straw men and obfuscation. Now, I don't know if I actually don't think he's doing it intentionally. Just my opinion here. Again, I don't know this guy. Goofs like Professor Dave and Sci-Man Dan, they're so disingenuous and intellectually dishonest as well as possibly mentally disabled. But they might be both. Whereas Bryant, I don't think he realizes how illogical and goofy he is, because I think he might actually have a problem. If he watched this video, I mean, I hope I don't make him cry, but he's being so anti-science here. And anti-logic. All he's doing is trying to shut down all logic and reason to maintain some kind of establishment dogma, which even him, like Witsit, I don't know, maybe he didn't do it yet. I've been watching a few different analyses, debates here to analyze for analyses. He might have not brought it up here yet, but Bryant is also, I don't even know if Bryant would claim that he knows 100% of the so-called establishment approved physics and science or whatever. So there's certain things that he's not taking into account, and he just flat out denies that some of these variables could be the reason for it. Again, false cause logical fallacy, false dichotomy logical fallacy. He needs to brush up on these children's level fallacies, otherwise he's just going to keep humiliating himself here. And it's kind of sad. Like, it's really not as funny as it is sad. Like, you know, with these other goofs like Professor Dave and Simon Dan, they're clueless goofer is actually kind of hilarious when they humiliate themselves. But this guy's a nice guy. This isn't that humorous to me. Some of the actual points being made or lack thereof, that's humorous. But on a personal level, you know, it's not that humorous because he seems like a really nice guy and just genuinely clueless about all of these aspects.
In general, like an ophthalmologist or an optician, kind of, it's like there's just one simple type of way to see perspective.
It's not simple.
And again, that's a false dichotomy, hasty generalization, and appeal to authority rolled into one. Again, this brings me no pleasure to point out these gigantic stacks of logical fallacies that Bryant is hallucinating somehow make legitimate or scientific points, which they obviously do not. And it's just these constant appeals. Oh, well, I'm not of this. I'm not of that. Oh, well, these so-called experts, whatever, they research it, they do it. You got to just put blind faith in it. Instead of actually breaking down the actual science and how it works the way it works. I mean, now would be a really good time. I'm bringing out Feynman because it's time. So this is a quote from Richard Feynman. Learn from science that you must doubt the experts. As a matter of fact, I can also define science another way. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. When someone says science teaches such and such, he is using the word incorrectly. Science doesn't teach it. Experience teaches it. If they say to you, science has shown such and such, you might ask, how does science show it? How did the scientists find out? How, what, where? Not science has shown, but this experiment, this effect has shown. And you have as much right as anyone else upon hearing the experiments, but we must listen to all the evidence to judge whether a reasonable conclusion has been arrived at. And Bryant Meyers represents everything that is the opposite of this. He has as anti-science as possible. Because all he does is demonstrate that everybody, and just point to and call and clamor for everyone to put their blind faith in the experts, the optometrists, the astrophysicists, all of these experts. He's like, I'm not of this, I'm not of that, but they are, and they've been doing it for decades. And then also, he not only does he not think they have as much right as anybody else about hearing the evidence to judge whether a reasonable conclusion has been arrived at, whether something logical, reasonable, adherent to the scientific method, whether the conclusion is valid or not. He doesn't think so at all. He thinks there's some kind of exclusive club of only these experts, these scientism priests, only they can talk to God and know the real truth. And then also, we must listen to all the evidence. All he does is shake his head and refuse to look at all these experiments and videos and evidence. Whereas the flat earthers here are being, even if they're wrong about the shape of the earth, they're being so much more scientific than this alleged man of science. I mean, it really is a sight to behold, these flat earth debates with these goofs that are claiming to be on the side of science, claiming to be for the utilization of science, when everything they're doing and saying is demonstrating the complete opposite. Bryant Meyers here is being as anti-science as possible, while pretending and hallucinating that he's actually being on the side of science. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, people. Continuing on even further on Feynman, this Nobel Prize winner in physics, he also stated this. I mean, this is a little, most people just refer to the earlier quote that I just read, but here's even more. quote, science alone of all the subjects contains within itself the lesson of the danger of belief in the infallibility of the greatest teachers in the preceding generation. When someone says science teaches such and such, he is using the word incorrectly. This is the full quote. Science doesn't teach anything, experience teaches it. If they say to you, science has shown such and such, you might ask, how does science show it? How do the scientists find out? How, what, where? It should not be science has shown, but this experiment, this effect has shown. And notice also how Bryant Meyers was unable to point to any of that regarding distances of the sun, of any of the stars. He just hallucinated and pretended that everybody should just take it on blind faith. He hasn't presented which experiment, how, what, why, where, everything that's actually real and scientific and the opposite of religion, Bryant has not provided here. It should not be science has shown, this experiment, this effect has shown, and you have as much right as anyone else upon hearing the experiments, but be patient and listen to all the evidence to judge whether a sensible conclusion has been arrived at. The experts who are leading you may be wrong. I think we live in an unscientific age in which almost all the buffeting of communication and television, words, books, and so on are unscientific. As a result, there is a considerable amount of intellectual tyranny in the name of science. Science alone of all the subjects contains within itself the lesson of the danger of belief in the infallibility of the greatest teachers of the preceding generation. And if anyone needs to heed these words more than Bryant Meyers, I don't know. And for anyone doubting that Feynman has said this, the source here is What is Science? This was presented at the 15th annual meeting of the National Science Teachers Association in New York City in 1966. Also published in the Physics Teacher, Volume 7, Issue 6, 1969, page 313 to 320. And unfortunately, Feynman's words were not heeded, as we find ourselves in a generation where logic and reason are quickly going extinct, which is actually the reason the MINDSHOCK podcast exists in the first place. Alright, so we're actually going to end it there for this first part, because this is all quite dense. There's so much more to cover here in this just extreme goofery, non-stop usage of logical fallacies, and fundamental lack of understanding of the scientific method. So, yeah, hope you guys found this interesting and entertaining. Stay tuned for part 2. I'll be finishing this up there. If you enjoyed the podcast, find it interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like and share, spread the use of logic and reason out there on the interwebs, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.